Good morning, one and all. Welcome to the 6th day of our online national FDP. I welcome all the participants. I have today 2 technical sessions and our guest is already online. So I would request Rameshwar Solanke sir to kindly introduce our today's guest, Dr. Vishram Dole sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You are.
It's my immense pleasure and privilege to introduce Sri Vishram Dhole sir at this UGC HRDC Savitribai Phule Pune University sponsored faculty development program on impact of literature on youth in current situation. Uh, Professor Dhole works as assistant professor at Department of Media and Communication Studies, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. He has more than 20 years of experience of teaching at graduation and post-graduation courses, visiting faculty at many reputed academic and professional institutions. He worked as journalist for reputed Marathi dailies for 9 years before joining academics. Continues to write columns and articles for leading newspapers like Lok Satta. He appears as panelist for television channels and works as a professional cephalogist for newspapers. He works as communication consultant for advertising and public relation agencies. He conducts training for editorial staff of leading newspapers, corporate and public sector understandings. He wrote 3 books on communication and mass communication, translated 2 English books, Romance of Tata Steel and Blood Brothers into Marathi. He published papers in national and international publications. He also worked for various academic bodies, contributed towards establishing BA Liberal Arts courses at Savitribai Phule Pune University. And it's my privilege to say about him. He has a contribution in communication technology, media philosophy, political communication, popular culture, music in Hindi movies, and science of philosophy, and many more things in his credit. And I'm privileged to introduce such huge and giant personality in the field of journalism, in the field of teaching at Savitribai Phule Pune University, and we are privileged enough to have his intellectual feast that he will going to provide in a future time. In a future time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to introduce today's resource person. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rameshwar sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Vishram sir, I would request you to kindly share your slide and continue with the talk.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Rameshwar sir, for this kind and generous introduction. I'm not too sure how worthy I am for these words, but I think in the next couple of minutes, you may be able to find out how worthy I am to the description that has been given to you, right? But nevertheless, it's a great pleasure for me to interact. These are the opportunities proactively seek, because this is a time when I get to interact with my colleagues, my friends. Otherwise, we often interact with students, but interacting with the fellow colleagues is quite an interesting and learning experience, because we share, understand each other, because we are more or less sailing in the same boat. Okay, so to that extent, I'm very happy, and I'm extremely thankful to Rupa ma'am for having me. And she had to literally follow up on a couple of occasions to have me here. I was like a typical forgetful professor, used to forget to respond to her mails, but then she has the perseverance, and finally I am sharing some of my thoughts with you. Okay, now the topic, as you know, is literature, media, and youth. I will, of course, share my PPT with you, but I would suggest that the sharing of PPT, there would be question and answers to things. And when I'm almost as much, a co-traveler in this field as you are, and therefore, please feel free to contradict, to question, to add to whatever I say. Okay, right. So with this, I'll begin my presentation. I'll first share my PPT. Okay. Hello.
Yes, yes, sir. We can see that.
Uh, you can see the PPT and
Ye-
I'm audible, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Right. So the topic that I would be dealing with today is just let me, yeah, is media, literature, and youngsters. Okay. Now, it's a huge topic because each of these three words, media, literature, and youngsters, is a highly value laden words. These are. And therefore, it would be important to first set out the agenda of what I'm going to share with you. Otherwise, it would go in a different directions. So, what's my agenda? I have four major points to make in this presentation. Uh, I would first deal with the idea of medium, because I think unless we get the idea of medium per se and some kind of a theoretical orientation of the idea of medium, we will not be able to understand the huge changes that we are in. Even if we consider literature as the only domain for our concern at the moment, it is undergoing huge changes. And in order to make better sense of these changes, it is important to first get a clear conceptual idea, a conceptual clarity of the term called medium, or let's say plural media. And for this, I will be taking help of a great scholar of me. Take it a little later. The second point is away from the literature per se. So I would not be talking about, let's say, Shakespeare or Premchand or any of contemporary or classical author, writer, poet, novelist, and so on. I'm going to take you through the process, what I call it as a literary process. It's a huge process which begins with production and ends in the interaction. Okay, so just to give you the broad idea, the literary process comprises of production, storage, distribution, consumption, and interaction. So surely we are all students of language, and this FDP is for literature. But literature is much more than simply the text that the literature contains. It is a broad process. And therefore, I would be taking you through the literary process. And unless we focus on the literary process, we would not also be able to get the complete grasp of what medium does at various levels of this process. So that's the second point. The third point then is the amalgamation of first into the second. What does that mean? It means when you introduce the idea of medium, when you bring a medium into the literary process, what happens? What changes you actually see in literature or in the literary process? And this is, I sum up by saying that we move from text to hypertext. So when we say a range of media, a plethora of media are introduced in literary process, we gradually move from text to hypertext. So that's the third point. And the last is the young and the digital, because the FDP focuses on the young. Here I take a little liberty of interpreting the word young in a little broader way. Of course, I refer the word young in the context of people, individuals. People are young, and we know that there is a certain age that we associate with being young. There is a certain characteristic, mental, emotional characteristic that we associate with the word young. They're of course there, and we would take them forward. But I would also extend this word young even to the age of the medium. Okay, and therefore I would say even digital is a young medium as much as its consumers are. And therefore I have written that it is the young and the digital both imply more or less in the complementary way. So these are the four broad points that I would be sharing with you. But this is under certain conditions. There are certain assumptions that I have, because if you have to fit in a broad topic like this in a matter of 1 hour or so, you have to take something as granted, something as assumed, something as given. What I have taken something as given. I have taken two things. One, that digital is not the only mediation that has happened in the field of literature. Okay, literature has been mediated, or there have been lots of interventions of media in digital in the literary field. Say for example, radio came. Say for example, drawings came. Say for example, television came, cinema came. And we know, in fact, I'm sure many of you have worked on or have read, and I'm sure all of you have seen cinematic transformation of some literary work. We know, I mean, right from in case of Hindi, we know, Munshi Premchand wrote Godan, and there was a film on Godan. We know Devdas was written by in first Bangla, and then Devdas has been converted or transformed into not just one, but at least three or four, kind of films that we have. And there are several such examples that one can cite. That literature, masterpieces in literature have always been the subject matter of filmic transformation. Okay, but and I'm sure there has been a lot of work on that. Say, for example, what happens to a literary work when it is transformed from textual form to a cinematic form? And then I'm sure there are lots of work. Some of you might have also worked on it, but I would not go into it precisely for the reason because there's already been enough talked about this kind of a transformation of literature to films and to television. We may also see that there are also some television serials based on literary work. And I can tell you, some of you who understand Marathi, there was a play written by Vijay Tendulkar called Kamala, and I think 2 years back or 3 years back, there was a television serial based on that novel. And then there are several. Okay, I distinctly remember during the old days of Doordarshan, there was this Kala Pani, which was based on a novel. Then there was also Rag Darbari, again based on literary work in Hindi. So there have been examples both in film and television where literary works have been transformed into the new medium of film or television. But as I said, lots of work has been done, therefore I would not focus on it, and I would more or less focus on the new digital transformation of literature. And again, here also I am not looking at an existing literature being now converted into some kind of a digital form. Say for example, earlier some books were available only in the print copy. Now they are available they are now available on Kindle, and they are available on PDF. Again, I am not talking about those. I am talking about deeper levels of mediation in which the digital medium as such is involved in a complete sense. Okay, so I'm not touching upon some older aspect of mediation. That's my first assumption, or this is some kind of a liberty that I have taken for the sake of time, paucity of time. The second assumption that I have is I generally consider young as digital natives. I know this particular factor is now slowly changing, but I consider someone who is like, let's say, 13, 14, say teenage, from teenage to let's say 30 or 40, to be broadly sociologically young, at least biologically young. And I would be considering them as some kind of a starting point for my discussion on young. So on the basis of these two things, I would be now taking up the whole idea of media, literature, and the youngsters. Okay. Now, let's first focus on the idea of medium. And here you see Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan, as I told you, I would be taking the idea of medium on the basis of ideas put forth by Marshall McLuhan. Um, there are, of course, various ways to take up these ideas, but this is my preference, and I think this is a very potent way to understand medium as such, at least in this context. Marshall McLuhan was a Canadian scholar from the 1950s and 60s, and he passed away in 1980s. But I would say that he is one of the most profound scholars, almost a seer kind of a thing, with respect to media. As I said, he passed away in 1980, but many of the things that he said in 60s and 70s, which seemed to be some kind of a science fiction in 50s and 60s, are now realities. I'm sure all of us have heard this word and use this word quite often, called global village. Just to remind you, global village was the term coined and popularized by Marshall McLuhan. You know, we now read books on our laptop, and a small nail-sized microchip carries hundreds of books, almost our own personal library. I'll tell you, Marshall McLuhan has said it all in the same way in 50s and 60s. So when there was not even a PC there, and all that was there was simply major frame, like room like computers, and therefore he was quite a seer. And I'm taking his ideas to introduce you to the idea of mediation. McLuhan's idea is simple. McLuhan says that what is a medium? He says any medium is anything which extends your senses, which extends your faculty. What faculties we have? We have 5 faculties, as we know, as we say in Hindi or Marathi, Pancha Jnanendriye. Something that we sense making organs or sense making abilities, seeing, hearing, then tasting, touching, and speaking. So in many ways than one, these 5 senses, what happens when a medium is introduced? A medium extends our senses. So for example, when I put a microphone, I extend my speech. Okay. When I put clothes, I extend my skin, or I manipulate my skin. When I see something, when I use a spectacle, or when I use a television, I am extending my vision, and so on and so forth. Okay. In a way, anything that extends our sense is, according to McLuhan, is a medium, and therefore even light is a medium. Okay. Script could also become a medium, and this is precisely the point where I will intervene into this idea of mediation. I'll bring this idea of mediation to the field of literature, or for that matter, human sensitivity as such. I will not take you into all the details of McLuhan's work, because it's a huge work and it's a topic in itself. But Marx, or like Watson and Crick, or like Darwin, McLuhan has made a fundamental contribution in our historical understanding. What is his contribution? He says that our history could be understood in terms of the media environment that was prevalent at a particular point in time. And accordingly, he divides history, human history, he divides it into 3. For the sake of understanding, I am dividing it into a set of 5 phases. Okay. He only talks about 3, but I'm taking a cue from his conceptual kind of idea. I am extending it to the 5 phases. But I'll tell you which was his and which is mine. He says that there was, when we consider the idea of media, or for that matter, idea of literature, okay, there are 5 phases. There are 5 eras, so to say. The first is what we call it as an oral era. What is an oral era? He called it as a tribal sensitivity. What are the characteristics of the tribal sensitivity? There is no medium. There is no script. People, of course, use language, but the language doesn't have script. And I'm sure language is, all of you, since most of you may be the student of language, teachers of language or social sciences, I'm sure you would know that language first and foremost is an oral phenomena and then a written phenomena. Script came much later to language. language was first heard and spoken, right? And to that extent, he's talking about the tribal sensitivity as an era where there is no script for language. That means, where does the language exist? Language exists only in the minds of people, in the body of people, the speaker and the listener, and not anywhere else. That means the moment a word is uttered, it vanishes. It remains alive only in the memory. This is what he called as the oral culture, the orality. In oral culture, in the oral times or in the oral era, whatever being spoken is not recorded unless it is stored in human memory, right? There are no scripts. Okay. In fact, some of you may be knowing that there are several languages in India, okay, which are spoken but do not have script. Many of the tribal languages as such. In fact, while travel, Konkani as a language did not have a script till quite recently. Only in the last, I think, 100, 200 years that Konkani has accepted two scripts. One was a Roman script, and then recently the Devanagari script. Okay, but as such, it didn't have script per se. And therefore, what happens when there is no script? As I said, there is a literature, but literature exists only in the memory. Literature doesn't exist in book. Okay, there are no books. There are only oral traditions. And in case if you know, many of our great literary work in India, and I think many parts of the world, first existed in the oral culture. Okay, Ramayana and Mahabharata were not written and they were not preserved in the way that the books that we consider of today. They were preserved mostly in the oral tradition. Vedas, Upanishads were actually not written in the form of book per se, but they were retained in an oral tradition, passed through an oral tradition. Okay. In fact, some of you may be knowing that whenever there is a puja at our home, and the performer says that Shruti Smriti Puranokta, right? What do you mean by Shruti? Shruti means heard. Smriti means memorized, right? So whatever has been heard and passed on to me from generations, whatever has been memorized by my previous generation, I am following this puja according to the Shruti and Smriti. That's what we say when we perform pujas, right? That means that there is a literature, okay, but the literature doesn't have script, or at least not initially, that it assumes script much later, okay. Now this is a different sensitivity. Here, it is a tribal sensitivity where whatever storytelling is, whatever narration is actually lived in here and now continuum. So it is lived, it is transformed from one body to another in a certain space and a certain time. So there is a liveness to the experience. So, the kind of stories that we hear from our grandmother, or the kind of stories that we tell to our children live, this is what we call it as the tribal sensitivity, where our entire body tells the story and not just the words. Okay, so that was a period. Then came a period from, thousands of years, but till 15th century, which I call it as the literal sensitivity. Okay, I call this literal sensitivity part 1, where language got script. What happens when language gets a script? Now the language, and therefore literature, can be stored outside the body, right? It can be stored on stones, it can be stored on tamrapatra, it can be stored on leaves, it can be stored on the paper, right? But it is still handwritten. It is still produced by people through their personal labor, their individual labor. Okay, this is called as, I would call as the literary sensitivity, where people began to write, but the copies were limited. And I'm sure all of you may be remembering that we had great libraries in Takshashila and Nalanda. Same, we had libraries in Alexandria, okay, where hundreds and thousands of books were there, but the books were, sorry, the books were actually manuscripts. Sorry. The books were actually manuscript. That means there were only couple of, maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 5 copies available, and that's it. So if anyone wanted to know and read the books, the person will have to access those very scarce number of copies, very limited number of copies. So you'll have to go to Nalanda, Takshashila, Alexandria, or whichever the place is, and then possibly read it. It was not possible for you to read it at the place you wanted because the number of copies were very, very limited. I call this as literal sensitivity part 1. Okay, there was of course some kind of a visualization that was involved, but language was also memorized, but literature begins. There are authors now. An individual can sit and can write. Say, for example, in oral tradition, we have folk literature. Okay, and in folk literature, there is no authorship, so to say, right? Do you know that who is the author of the folk stories? Probably not, right? There's no authorship in folk literature, but there is an authorship in the moment there is a medium outside the body to write and to store, and therefore authorship begins. The moment script arrives, authorship begins. I'm not saying that in orality there was no authorship at all. There was, but then the authorship was a very limited one. The authorship could easily be challenged, and we will see how it is also coming again now in the digital era, but I'll come to that a little later. But the moment there is a script, the moment there is a paper, the moment there is a some medium to store it outside, authorships assume significance. Then came the third era. McLuhan includes the third era also in the second era. For the sake of convenience, I have divided into two. The third era, again a literate sensitivity, or what I call it as a typographic sensitivity. And what is a typographic sensitivity? 1415, something very, very important happened. And what was that? It was the invention of printing press by Gutenberg. Okay, and as you know, typography was set, printing was possible, mechanical printing. And what mechanical printing made possible? Mechanical printing could now print hundreds of copies at low cost and at much, much less time. And the books were produced exactly in the same way. So one copy didn't differ from the other copy as long as there is an active intervention into it. Okay, so suddenly the number of copies increased, the price came down, the time to produce copies also came down heavily, and suddenly books spread all across. My dear teachers, I must remind you that you and me, people who are now 30 plus, I'm of course 50 now, but you and me are children of the book era. The institutes, the college that we work with, the education that we are giving is all centered around this sensitivity of typographic sensitivity, what we call it as the book sensitivity. In fact, if you remember today, how are we judged as teachers? How do we get promotions? How are we ranked as teachers? We are ranked on the basis of not how well we actually teach in the class per se, but how many publications we have, right? So writing books, writing papers, publishing it is far more important for us as teachers. Colleges boast their credibility by claiming that they have these many books and this, lakhs of books and so on and so forth. How are we judged in our, UGC and other things? We are judged on the number of library publications that we have. And this all we owe to the typographic sensitivity, the book sensitivity. This we could see from 1450 to 1840, universities began, the entire education began to get centered around book, and the kind of literature that we think about today is actually majorly based on this second sensitivity called literate sensitivity or typographic sensitivity. We are all typographical men and women. Okay. Then came the third, or let's say fourth era with the medium, 1840 to 1980. This is almost more than 100 years of era. And during this era, new medium were introduced, right from telegraph in 1940, okay, to satellite television in 1980s. And what all were introduced, and most of the mass media that we think about today were developed and strengthened during this particular period. What is this period? From telegraph to still photography to radio to telephone to moving camera to cinema, radio as a medium, television as a medium, satellite television as a medium. Okay, so all the mass media that we think today were actually part of this particular era. And gradually, this era began to challenge the dominance of book. The moment there were radio, the orality was reinvented. Okay, the moment there was still photography, the painting was reinvented. The moment there was cinema, the whole lived visual experience was reinvented. The moment there was television, the whole community visual experience was reinvented. In a way, slowly but steadily, in these 140 years or so, we moved from the typographical mindset, an era dominated by books. We moved to an era dominated by mass media, dominated by audio, dominated by visual. Okay, and as we know, this was a period of film, cinema, radio, television. I mean, of course, book existed and books still continue to exist, but books will have to constantly exist along with cinema, along with television. We have to divide our time between these several aspects of literature, that means the book oriented literature or narration, to a non-book, film, cinematic, radio narration. This is, according to McLuhan, is now reinventing the tribal experience. There is a difference between reading a book, okay, and reading and watching a movie. Say, for example, I'll give an example from Hindi cinema. There's a difference between reading Sharad Babu's Devdas as a book and watching Sharad Babu's Devdas on big screen in theater. When we watch Shah Rukh Khan's or KL Sehgal's or Dilip Kumar's Devdas in screen, it is a community experience. Okay, there is some kind of a big screen in front of us. We are all in dark, experiencing Devdas and the acting of the corresponding actors and so on as a part of the community experience. But when I read Sharad Babu's Devdas, either in English or in Bangla or in Marathi or whichever language, I'm reading it as an individual, somewhere in my own room, somewhere in my own solitude. So when I read, my mind is the theater. But when I watch cinema, the screen is my imaginative theater. Okay. When I read Sharad Babu's Devdas, how Devdas would look is completely dependent on me. But when I watch Sanjay Leela Bhansali's Devdas, I have to think Devdas as one depicted by Shah Rukh Khan or KL Sehgal or Dilip Kumar. I have no other way. In a way, these are different experiences. So what McLuhan calls is that this is kind of a reinventing the tribal experience. Okay. So this lasted almost till 1980s, and it still is. I mean, I'm not saying that all these eras have gone. In fact, please don't consider that these eras are exclusive. We still have oral experiences. We still have literary experiences. We still have typographic experiences. I'm not saying that one has completely overshadowed the other, but I'm talking about the relative dominance of each of the era. And what is the new era that is we are part of? We are now part of the 21st century. I call it as there is new nomad. We have become new nomad in the sense we have become new nomad because when you are on Facebook, okay, or when you are elsewhere, okay, on screen, when you are on mobile, when you are on television, with when you are on computers with internet on, are you exactly in the same place? No. I'll just give you a very coincidence. When I was talking about the new nomad a couple of seconds ago, I just received a call on my mobile. I cut that call, but at least for a moment, as some of you might have noticed, my attention was distracted to my mobile and I was thinking about who was one who was trying to contact me. So it's like I'm not there completely with you, at least for a moment. Okay, my existence is split into a couple of things. So for example, a part of it is with you through this presentation. A part of it is on my mobile trying to see who is trying to call me. And I think surely it is with many of you right now. Some of you sitting at your home, okay, are now watching your presentation, but some smarter of you could also be doing some other things, maybe eating, maybe doing something else, right? So you never know what you are doing. Your existence is splintered into many things. You might be checking your Facebook updates, you might be checking any other things, you might be even reading a newspaper, whatever. In a way, we are constantly moving from streams of consciousness. I am here and now, I am there and now. Okay, so in the same moment I am there. It's like a nomad. A nomad is never a stationary person. He keeps on moving from one place to the other. We are also like that. We keep on moving from one window on the screen to the other. We keep on moving from one screen to other. In fact, there is something, a new phenomena I'm sure you must all have experienced, called three screen phenomena. Just watch your television experience. What happens? Imagine you are sitting in your drawing room watching television. You have a laptop on your lap, so you're watching a serial on television. You're also in the same time responding to your mails, and at the same time you have your mobile next to you, and maybe calling or checking your Facebook updates. It is called as three screen phenomena. So where are you now? Are you watching TV? Are you on Gmail? Or are you answering a mobile call? You are doing all the three at the same time, transferring from one to the other like a nomad travels. In a way, we are nomad. And remember, this is precisely the point that we should take into account, that the contemporary mediation, contemporary digital culture has made us new nomads. So what we are producing, literature, is for the new nomad. It is not for the retribalized person, so to say. It is not for the typographic man. The contemporary literature is produced for the new nomad. Okay, so that's a very, very important point that we must consider before we actually take it up to the literature. So the third point, or the second point, so what is literature? And this is where I said that literature, though we as teachers and through our syllabi, we talk most about the text. That means we talk about the story, the narrative within the literature. But I would expand this and say literature is a process. It's a textual production. And what are the aspects of the textual production? There are four aspects, so to say, or broadly speaking, five aspects. I have put it in four. Production and storage of text. So when a literary work, when you read a literary work, it has come to you through a process. What is the process? It is a production storage process. So the moment you produce a literature, there is a rise of an author. So you, as a author, you write. There is an editor who would go through it, make some correction. Then there is a mode of production. So you print it. There's a capital involved into it. There's a money involved in it. There's a cost involved in the production. Okay. There is a medium on which it is stored. Okay. Say, for example, a simple thing is hardbound books and paperbacks, right? Now, what is it? Hardbound is some kind of a storage medium. Paperback is some different kind of a storage medium. And I'm sure you must have also heard the word pulp fiction, right? I'm sure this is a word common in literature. What do you mean by pulp fiction? I mean, if you look at the historical or etymological orientation of pulp fiction was that kind of a literature which was initially published on a very low quality paper, almost resembling a paper pulp. And who used to use this pulp for low quality paper? It was, people who wanted to somehow get published with minimum cost. Those who were in hurry of publication, who wanted to, and therefore they had low, and therefore pulp fiction was treated in a slightly negative way, right? And as I'm sure you would realize that the word pulp fiction carries some kind of a negative connotation. It's a part of the connotative process, or it's a part of the production process. So the storage at which it is there, it's also part of the production process. So production and storage is an important aspect. The second aspect is how it is distributed. Publication industry, you know what? I mean, we write several papers, but the publisher must accept to distribute it to the people, right? The journals must accept it. I may have written some novel, but I must find a proper distributor who would take it to the prospective audiences. So the distribution agency comes in, the publication agency comes in. There is chain of depots and libraries. Well, fine, my book is being distributed, but if it is not available for buying and selling in public book depots, or it's not available in library, what to do? Okay, and there is an act of buying. There is a proactive thing called buying the books, or selling the books, or lending the books. So this is a distribution. All of this has implication to literature. So for example, a particular government may decide that, well, this book is banned. I'm sure all of you know there are certain books which are banned from time to time. Salman Rushdie's book were banned, and then we know there were books on Shivaji Maharaj and other people, which we found not to be correct or hurting our sentiments. They get banned, and so on and so forth. So all this becomes part of literature. So whether what kind of literature may reach finally to people depends on the mode of distribution. And I think the field of language and literature cannot completely be understood unless we pay attention to distribution. Then consumption. How do we consume literature? And I think the general literary process we consume as a solitary individual. I'll come to that a little later. Okay, we consume books in private spaces. Okay, in our personal pace, at our personal pace, and we generally read books in a linear manner, one book at a time, right? Or once we take a book, we read it through the pages, first page and the second and the 13th and the 15th and 100th and the 101st and so on and so forth. And then the last point is interaction. How do we interact with book and the author? Generally, our interactions with the author are low if we look at the traditional literary process of books. How often do we meet author? Very, very rarely. Many times it is not even possible to meet the author because the author is no more. Okay. And even if the author is around, it may not be possible for us because we are separated by thousands of kilometers. So there are low interactions, there are infrequent interaction, and then the interactions are non-collaborative. That means that even if we interact with an author, okay, and say that I liked it or I didn't like it, or I like this part and not that part, and how it would have been had we changed this thing to that thing. Now, even if author likes it, it cannot be changed now. The text cannot be changed. In that way, once it is produced by author, despite of interaction of the author with the audiences, the text cannot be changed. And in that sense, it is non-collaborative. So remember, when we consider literature, it is assumed on some of these principles. Now let's move to the next point, and this is where I would like to take you. So what happens when we move from the literary text to the digital text? And as I said, I am now not considering too much of transformation of literature into films and radio programs or television serial. I will straightway jump to the digital literature. Okay, and that's why I'm saying, what is the journey of text to hypertext? I would consider word hypertext in an intertextual way, where the hypertext would also mean the HTTP protocol, which links several sites together. But I would also say hypertext as added, multiplied text. Okay, and therefore it's a great movement as we move from text to hypertext. It is almost, and take it from me, friend, that it is almost a paradigmatic kind of a change. What happens it? But before we do it, what do you mean by digital or electronic literature? Sometime, and I'm using it in some kind of a pun, okay, some kind of a intertextual way, digital or electronic literature, or e-literature or elite, okay, and to some extent, digital literature is still little elite, at least for some time, at least for these days. Okay, so what do you mean by digital literature? Okay, digital literature can have several manifestations. Okay, but I just jotted down a few of them. Website is a part of digital literature. So if you write on a website, that can become a digital literature, or it is a digital narrative. Website is searchable, it is linked to some other website, it has links and hyperlinks, but whatever within that is there on the website is fairly static. At times it may be updated occasionally or in some kind of a regular way, but website, whatever text is produced on the website, can be called as a digital text or an electronic text. Same goes with blogs. Websites generally do not have a very single authorship as such. I mean, of course, there are single author websites. I'm not saying there aren't any, but by and large, most of the websites are either multi-authored or an ambiguous author per se. But we want to claim the authorship, then we start blogs. Blogs are usually individually signed, okay, and therefore there are blogs. Audiobooks, I'm sure many of you might have heard some of our classic literature getting converted into an audiobook. There are new apps called Storytel and many other which are now converting many of the existing literary work into a audio narrative. Say for example, uh, Pride and Prejudice may be available not simply in the form of a written text, but somebody has actually read it aloud. It is stored as a digital file and you can access it on your mobile or any of the digital device. So audiobooks. And remember, the moment a human voice is introduced into a text, it no longer remains a single text, it becomes a multi-text. Of course, it has the language aspect and it has the tonality, the audio, the pace, the pitching, the intonation, the pauses, the music. All this would all add an added layer of meaning to the literary text, and therefore it becomes a hypertext, a digital text. Same goes with posts on Facebook and many other social websites. There are wiki pages. Wiki, we know Wikipedia, but the word wiki means a collaborative effort. Okay. Now, of course, Wikipedia is one of the greatest, greatest collaborative effort in the history of mankind. Okay. But there are many other wiki things. So, for example, Google Map, okay, is a wiki experience. Okay. So wiki means anything which is prepared, a text which is produced out of collaboration. So there is no single author, but a set of authors, many a time almost unknown authors, working at different places and different time. Okay, so that called as wiki pages. That is also a new type of digital literature. And of course, a very, very small literature called twits. I'm sure some of you are on Twitter, and Twitter does not allow you to write huge things. Twitter has a certain limitation of characters. In fact, it is called as micro blogging. Okay. Initially, Twitter only allowed 140 characters. Now it is slightly changed. But very, very small thing. In fact, on internet, there is something called as TTT. Okay, there is a site called TTT. And you know what TTT stands for? Terribly tiny tells. So it's a tell, that means it's a story told not more than 20 words, 25 words. Okay, now that's hugely tiny. That's a terribly tiny, right? So right from TTT to well-written blogs, long blogs, digital platforms have several avatars of electronic literature. Now, how does the digital literary process change as compared to the book-centered literary process? And this is the intervention of the medium. What happens? Well, how does the literary production, digital literature, how is digital literature produced and stored? How is digital text produced and stored? A digital literature could be both individualistic, could be collaborative. Wikipedia, any of the wiki pages are collaborative efforts. Okay. In fact, you might come across an actual story which is made out of collaboration. So, for example, the first narrative juncture of a story is written by one, and then he says it's open for anyone to add. And then the second person would add, then the third person would add, and that's how the story would go on. So it's kind of almost an unended, at least theoretically, infinitely open narrative structure. Okay, and that is possible because of collaborative process. I'll just draw your attention at the difference between Encyclopedia Britannica as a piece of literary work, if at all you consider it as a piece of literary work, okay, and Wikipedia. What's the difference? Encyclopedia Britannica or our traditional encyclopedias would get a closed narrative version of something, whereas Wikipedia pages are theoretically open for constant updation, constant changes. In that way, they are theoretically open narrative, whereas Encyclopedia Britannica pages are theoretically closed narrative. Okay, that's the first point. The second point, and very, very important point, is that digital literature is very rarely only word oriented. Words are always intertwined, intermeshed with visual and audio. In that way, they are multimedia. It's not simple one monomedia. They are multimodal, multimediated. So that means you may have an audio, you may have a visual, you may have a video, you may have an animation, you may have an immersive environment, you have a clickable link, and so on and so forth. And where is it stored? Now, it is produced by digital technologies. Books are produced by hard printing technologies. Where it is stored? It is stored on ethereal digital space, cloud, or our, those pen drives, or our hard disks. How is it is distributed? It is distributed not in the physical way, but it is distributed in an ethereal way. We do not know where it comes from and where it goes. Okay, we simply have only an internet link, and that's it. So it is distributed through network or social media and websites and hypertext. Okay, in that way it is a digital distribution. It is not bought and sold in the traditional way. It is uploaded and downloaded. Okay, and these are different processes. They are disembodied process. Books have body, but digital thing do not have body. So book can be bought and stored, but the digital literature is simply uploaded and downloaded. And then most of the time, digital literature is stored, is shared, or it is available mostly free. I'm not saying it is entirely free, but as compared to the book culture, digital literature is mostly shared and it is free as compared to the book. How it is consumed? And this is something very, very important. Digital literature is consumed through screens. We don't consume the traditional literature through screen, right? In fact, there is I'm sure your and my generation would prefer to read books on pages rather than on screen. Many people complain that, the reading book is a different experience than reading the same thing as a PDF file on screen. Remember, the moment screen is introduced, it changes the, cognitive and other aspects of reading as such. Who is an who is who is a reader in digital space? A reader in digital space is not a social entity as such. He is completely an individual because he logs into it with his own personal email ID, personal login ID, personal password. So there is a environment which encourages self-indulgence, high individuality. It is not a social individualism, but it is high individuality. So I read it almost as if I am simply cut off from the social. Okay, I am simply a private entity. How is the experience of reading the book, reading a digital literature? It's a fluid experience. I do not know when I read digital literature, I am not too sure whether I'm commenting as a private person or I'm commenting it as as a public person. When I read book, I know I'm surely a private person. Okay, but when I am reading the same thing on digital platform, whether I am a private one or when I am a public one is difficult. I'll give you an example. Say, for example, you read a good literary piece and then there are comments. So what happens is you come to know who else has commented. You comment, and your comment is also known to a large number of people. So what are you reading it as? Are you reading it as a public? Because if it is public to a great extent, because your comments are understood and read by anyone in the matter of in the public sphere whom you may know, you may not know. Or it could be also private if you decide not to comment. Okay, so it's a very fluid experience of private and public, and it's a non-linear, multi-track and fleeting. So for example, how do you read a post on Facebook? Do you really hang on to a Facebook post or a tweet for more than a couple of seconds or minutes? The flow on Facebook and Twitter simply compels you to move on and on and on. It discourages you to hang on to a post. It's like traveling in a local in Mumbai. Okay, in Mumbai local, if you have an experience of Mumbai local, you don't have to walk on your own. The crowd pulls and pushes you in and out of the train. So Facebook or Twitter is like a Mumbai local train, full crowded, where the crowd would pull and push you, and you will have tough time managing your own movement. In that way, reading something digital literature is usually a fleeting experience. Okay, but when we read a book, we go to our own corner, we have a cup of coffee with us, okay, and then we close ourselves and we read and focus only on the book, and we don't like us to be disturbed by anyone when we read a book, a normal, the classic way of reading the book. But when we are on Facebook, we actually love to be disturbed by a phone call. We love to be disturbed by another tweet, by another email, or several others, right? And that's what it is. So it's a multimedia, multi-track, non-linear experience. And how it is? It is highly interactive. There's a frequent interactions. The author wants the interaction, and this interaction is scalable. So if I am an author and I write a blog, I come to know that how many of you are following me. If my tweet is a literary one, I come to know how many people have seen my tweet, how many have retweeted, how many have liked, shared, how many have been the visits. Remember, the scalability is much higher. Of course, I understand that even case of books also there is a scalability. Okay, people know that this is the first edition, second edition, third edition. We may say this is the top 10 popular books, and there is some kind of a scalability. Of course, there is a scalability even in the printing world, but the scalability, its extent, and its dynamism, the kind of which you see in the digital space, cannot be matched by the printing space. So it's a hugely dynamic scale of scale. The digital literature is scalable and saleable, and it is collaborative. So if you could see that digital literature which the youngs consume is so fundamentally different than the traditional literature. Okay, and it is fundamentally different owing to this 4 or 5 stages. And that's why I said that we must understand literature not simply as a text but as overall process. And you could see that the digital text changes in many is different, paradigmatically different than the other. So what are the characteristics of digital literature? I mean, I am just compressing the previous discussion into some kind of a broad patterns. So first, digital literature is very rarely, if at all, is text alone, is only a word alone, it's only language alone. It is usually accompanied by visuals. Those of you who are on Facebook would know that, I just for your information, if you write a text alone post on Facebook, that means only words, only the script language, and you make that post, I'll tell you, Facebook in its algorithm suppresses such posts. These posts do not get circulated well, both in the mode of algorithm of distribution, and also people don't pay much attention to it. I'll tell you, as you might know through my introduction, I have written several. I write on newspaper, and initially when I was a novice on Facebook way back in 2012 and 13, you know, I used to share the text of my article that has appeared in newspaper on my Facebook post, and I used to share only the text. Okay, and then I only used to get maybe just 10-15 likes and 20 comments and so on and so forth. And then I realized that if I add some visual to it, suddenly the reach increases. It's a part of the algorithm, and it is also part of what catches the attention of people, readers, in the fleeting experience of Facebook. And therefore, digital literature is hardly, if at all, as I said, only text. It is accompanied by visuals, video as such. It is also supported sometime by the audio. How it is? It is short, micro, crisp. As I told you, terribly tiny tales. Okay, microblogs, tweets, memes. Memes is an example of both. In fact, memes is an example of visual as well as short, micro, and crisp. Okay, so it's a different kind of literature. Okay, I am not too sure how many of you would read a novel of or a short story or a story of 700 words on your mobile. How many of you would be happy to read a 5,000 page story, 5,000 word story on your laptop screen? it's difficult. It's cognitively difficult to go through that experience. And that's why Kindle? Because Kindle is also screen, but screen of a different type. The screen of Kindle does not allow you to navigate beyond the text. And that's why Kindle is meant for reading experience, book-like reading experience on screen. In fact, the Kindle screen brightness is also adjusted in such a way that it simply resembles the brightness that would be there on a typical book page. And that's why Kindle, despite being screen, is almost like a book. Okay, but otherwise, all our reading experiences on screen are different, and in such cases, reading lengthy things is very difficult, and we require short, micro, crisp. It is hyperlink, multi-track. For example, on Wikipedia pages, when we read from Wikipedia provides links to, so I start, let's say I start reading about Shakespeare, okay, or I start reading with Visa Khandekar, an entry on or Wikipedia, or Pula Deshpande, or I start with Mahadevi Verma, or anyone. And then I have provided with several links. So I may start with reading with Pula Deshpande as such, and I may end up reading Kamleshwar. You never know. I may start with Shakespeare, reading the wiki entry on it, but if I start clicking the links in between, I may actually end up on page on Steven Spielberg. You never know. Okay, so it's hyperlink, multi-tracked. It's not a narrative, straightway, linear reading of a book. It is intertextual, mimetic. Now, this is some concept which I'm sure some of you who come from language background would know, but I will take a minute to explain what do we mean by intertextuality. Intertextuality means referring some previous text, taking some help from an existing established previous text, and then adding on to it. That's what I call it as intertextuality. Intertextuality is that moment when the present text takes help of a previous text. The previous text is called as hypotext, okay, and the new text is called as hypertext, okay, and the link between hypotext and hypertext is what we call as intertextuality, okay. And intertextuality, take it from me, my friend, is a hugely important literary phenomena that we are part of. It is so difficult these days to consider literary work, or for that matter any digital work, which is completely original. Most of it is intertextual. Most of it. I'm not saying all, but mostly. Meme is an intertextual example. What do you mean by meme? Meme is like I take a shot from some film, okay, and I add my comment on it, okay. Say for example, I'm sure many of you would remember that historic dialogue from Diwar between Amitabh Bachchan and Shashi Kapoor, where Amitabh Bachchan asks, "Aaj mere paas gaadi hai, bangla hai, ye hai, wo hai, tumhare paas kya hai?" And then Shashi Kapoor says, "Mere paas maa hai." And I'm sure during the pandemic time, there were several memes made on it. Some, I mean, the picture of that was taken, and then it was added, "Aaj mere paas गाड़ी है, बंगला है, ये है, वो है, तुम्हारे पास क्या है?" And the mimetic Shashi Kapoor would say, "मेरे पास sanitizer or mask है." Right? Now that's a meme. That's an intertextual reference. We enjoy this because we know the dialogue from Diwar. We have a history of that, and there are several such. In fact, memes is a phenomenally important literary device in the contemporary literary work. It's a phenomenally important device, okay? And I think as teachers of literature, or for that matter, as anyone who is interested in contemporary literary experience, must get acquainted and must feel comfortable with understanding the literature intertextuality as such. Okay, there is almost some kind, as they say, original is dead, long live original, and the new mantra is intertextual. Okay, say for example, sometimes the memes could be, you take Mona Lisa as a painting, and and then you draw mustache to Mona Lisa. Now that's intertextuality. Most of the literature that is produced on this is intertextual mimetic. I've already spoken about scalable, sellable interactivity. Okay, and then the last point about it, that how do we access the intertextual, how do we access the digital literature, how do we access the printed literature? We access through the library, we access through book depot, we access through our personal networks. So somebody has read the book and would recommend it to you and say, yeah, this book is wonderful, please read it, and then we would go and read it. So we would access and we would come to know about the books through personal networks, through library catalogs, through book depot recommendations, and so on and so forth. But how do we access the books on, how do we access literature on digital platforms? It is through the metadata. It is through the keywords that you assign to your blog posts. It is through the hashtags. It is through the algorithms of the Facebook, the Googles, the the Twitters, and so on and so forth. And if they decide to change the algorithm, I'm sure the kind of text that you'll be able to access would be different. Okay, I just give you an example. Just 2 years back, Facebook used to give priority to Facebook pages as compared to Facebook posts of individual. Then 2 years back, Facebook changed this algorithm and Facebook pages were not given as much priority as individual posts. And certainly people who wrote long literary pieces on their independent Facebook pages found it difficult to reach to their audiences. Okay, so the distribution of digital literature is based not on the physical networks, not on the social relations, but it is based on the apaurushaya, so to say, ambiguous algorithms of the social networking site, the Googles, the search engines, and also on the hashtags, and also on the metadata, the keywords that you associate with your digital literature. Okay, right? So this is how we are coming into a different paradigm as such. So who are the digital and young? And that's the last point for this. The digital and the young. Who are the digital natives? Remember my generation, anyone who were, I think most of you were born before 1990s. Okay, I'm not too sure if any of you has been actually born post 1990s, but those of you who are born pre 1990s, we are not digital natives. Okay, who are the digital natives? Digital natives are the one who were born post 1990. They are digital natives and we are digital migrants. A generation like me and generation of those people born pre 1990 have migrated to the digital world. Okay, either out of choice or out of compulsion. We were not born. We were not born in the digital spaces, right? In fact, I am reminded of a very, very interesting Facebook page. Earlier, Facebook used to be only, crowded by youngsters from, let's say, age group of 14 to 35 as such. And then Facebook became very, very popular and oldies like me joined Facebook, who were past their 35, 30, 40s joined Facebook. Okay, and that means the people who were there on Facebook earlier, the first subscribers to Facebook, also found that their mothers and their parents and their teachers were on Facebook. Okay, suddenly their own territory of their peer group, the youngster, was overcrowded by their parents. In fact, you have to see that your father also sending you a friend's request, and that was such a embarrassing position to accept, your father as your friend on Facebook, right? And I remember there was a Facebook page. It was actually titled, say, "Oh crap, I am dead on Facebook. My father has joined Facebook," right? So the digital natives began to become very uncomfortable because digital migrant, the oldies like me and you, began to join Facebook. So where did they move? I'm sure some of you may know that the Facebookers, the early digital natives of the Facebookers, have now moved to Insta. Insta is now far younger in terms of age than the Facebook. Now Facebook has become older not simply by its own age. Even younger is what was that? I'm so sorry, I forgot that thing where you Snapchat. Snapchat is even younger. Okay, TikTok was also pretty young, right? Twitter is pretty old, right? So there are digital natives and digital migrants. Who are these digital natives? Digital natives um, are by mindset, by emotion, they are always on the go because there is so much of dynamism in the digital flow. Digital flow is very, very rapid, very, very dynamic. And therefore, when you are in the digital stream, you have to be on the go. Unlike the non-digital people, when you are on the book, you are always working on a history because you have reading a book which has been written in a historical time. It is telling you the story of the past. Digital is telling you story of the present. In fact, not simply the present, it is telling you the story of the moment. The present, the time has collapsed into the moment. Unlike the book, classical literature, which takes you through the history, digital literature forces you to live in the moment, on the go, on the spur of the moment. This is another point that we have no. In digital literature, we read Swanta Sukhai. And what do you mean by Swanta Sukhai? I read literature, classical literature, in the book form for the pleasure of mind, which would begin in me and would end in me. The pleasure of reading resides in me. But when you are digital, the real pleasure of the digital is not simply the consumption, but it is also in production. So when you are consuming digital literature, you become what is called as prosumer. You consume and you produce. You may produce a comment, you may produce a like, you may produce a share, you may write a nasty comment, you may appreciate, you may not. But whatever is it, you produce something in addition to the original text. In that way, it is a collaborative or reactive experience. Okay, so on Facebook, you may read Facebook posts, you may not post by yourself, but I'm sure you all respond. At least ek like to banta hai. That kind of response is always there. And in that way, the post and the like forms the broad hypertext. And as I said, it is a multimedia as compared to the monomedia. These are the characteristics of the young readers of the digital literature, and these are also in the way characteristics of the digital medium as such. Okay, so just a second. So what are the, and this is the last point before I open for questions. So what is the difference between the formal book-oriented world of literature, I call it as the unmediated world of literature, and what is the mediated world of literature, the contemporary digital or elite literature, electronic literature? And as you could see, it's a paradigmatic change. It is almost change of a colossal scale. It's a change of a huge scale, almost like a paradigm. Okay, so we are moving from a linear experience of the bygone book type literary era. When we are in multimedia, we are non-linear. From monomediality of the book era, we are moving into the multimediality. From individual being a social entity, we are moving being a networked entity. Book and the book era encourages to see the things, see the world in some kind of a narrative order, whereas when we see it in the digital, it is a chaos. I'm sure, and this is where I think many of you would, when you read a book, okay, when you read a book and the kind of final experience you feel like there's an ordered experience of reading the book. But the same, say for example, you have read a book for 2 hours, okay, and when you read Facebook post for 2 hours, what's the difference between reading a book for 2 hours and reading the Facebook posts for 2 hours? Reading books for 2 hours give you an experience of the world being a reasonably ordered world. Whereas trolling, whereas a strolling, not trolling, strolling on Facebook for 2 hours give you an experience of a chaos. Because on one Facebook post you read about BJP, on other you read about Congress, once you read on Trump, once you read it on some dish made by your friend, you read something else, you read something else on the other. So there is no cohesiveness, there is no order, and that's why chaos. The book culture, the traditional classical literature, encourages authorship, and that's why we cite. Okay, that's why we um, that's why we harp on citation, copyright, and so on and so forth. On digital, citation, authorship, copyright, all are gone and vanished. As they say sometime, digital is death of author. It is death of author for many things because of intertextuality and collaborative, and no one cares who has written in a chaos. Okay, in a chaotic atmosphere, authorship declines. In the classical world, literature is a matter of creation, and in the digital world, literature, I'm using a little harsh word, please do not do not take it as a negative word as such. I'm using the word cannibalism in a simple way, eating into someone else. What I told you, intertextuality, is you eat into somebody's work and you grow. So that's how cannibalism is. So the literary word in the digital era is cannibalistic. It may not create as much as it eats into the existing. There is so much of cut, copy, and pasting in the digital world than the traditional literary world. And that's why originality is a value in the traditional world, intertextuality is a value in the digital world. Book was the leader in the older literary tradition. Visual is the leader. Okay. In the traditional book dominated literary world, we are interested in the meaning. So when we read a book, when we read a poem, when we read a play, for that matter, when we read a closed narrative, we actually see the question that we ask is, what does it mean? So traditional literature is interested in a fundamental question called, what does it mean? We are interested in creating meanings. Whereas in the digital world, we do not emphasize the meaning so much. As such, we say what it is in the first experience. So here, we value experience of the digital literature more than the meaning of the literature. So if the traditional literature emphasizes meaning, the digital literature, mediated literature, emphasizes on experience. And therefore, and I would not go too much into it, therefore traditional literature is traditional or modern at best, whereas the digital literature is postmodern in its orientation. So when we move from, when there is a question of digitization, when there is a mediation, when there is a medium introduced in literature, it's not a simple transformation, it's a paradigmatic transformation, as I have argued so far and tried to sum up in this slide. Okay, I would end up by suggesting you to read at least two. There is so much written about this transformation. Okay, I absolutely does not mean that these two are the only matter worth reading or worth viewing. There are a plethora of material available to read into this transformation, but the one which you could at least begin with, okay, or one which I found to be personally, subjectively, I found to be very useful, at least for me, was please read McLuhan's two books, Understanding the Medium and Gutenberg's Galaxy. And there are lots of videos available on Marshall McLuhan by him or on him on YouTube. In the same way, also read a contemporary digital critic called Roberto Simnowski, and he has written three important works: Digital Art and Meaning, where he discusses literature, digital media and digital aesthetics, and as people of literature, the idea of literature cannot be divorced from the idea of aesthetics. So we also have to work out on digital aesthetics. So he talks about it, and digital algorithms and digital dilemma. The three works that he has written available both in the digital platform as well as non-digital platform, and there are the videos available on him. I'm suggesting this as a initial reading. I'll surely appeal you that you may begin with this, but should not definitely end in this. You please take it forward as such. Okay, I raise a question to you as a section, as a session in the FDP program. You are also supposed to attempt something after each session. So here is a question I would like you to attempt. Now, how you should attempt, in which way you should attempt, is something that your administrator, Shah madam, and other people would tell you. But at least the question I would leave you with. This is a question that you may attempt. I leave you with a question. Of course, I leave you a question for practical reasons because there's need to be a question for you, and also for a philosophical reason because I'm sure I must have left lots of questions in your mind because I am myself has these questions. So one of the questions that I would like you to reflect and write is what kind of literary experience it is when you read, write, or share a Facebook post or a tweet. You may say it is not a literary experience at all. Fair enough. Then prove or tell or argue why it is not a literary experience. If you think it is a literary experience of some type, then write why it is of some type. Or if you say that it is a literary experience of a completely different type, please write. Whatever your position, your subjective position is appreciated, accepted, as long as you argue it. And I hope and I expect that some of the lines that I discussed with you, some of the points that I raised in this discussion might just help you in attempting this question. Thank you so much. If any of these has to result in some kind of a learning, and the learning has to begin with a question, this is a question I would leave you with. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, all the participants. Thank you so much, Rupa ma'am, and all the organizers of this FDP. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Vishram. And it was actually a fantabulous session. We don't have words. It's excellent.
Thank you
and
so much.
If you just go through the chat box, you can find how many people have complimented you for the same.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
But we are not going to leave you right now.
Sure.
There are some questions they have raised and they want answer from you. Yeah. The first question by Ripunjoy is culture and society both are interrelated and subsidiaries to each other.
Yes.
What are the main focus of media and cultural studies and why and how at this time it is important?
Okay. I think that's a very, very good question, a little large question, and I might probably require much more time, but I'm sure will not take the time. I will be succinct in my answer. I will be almost like, bullet point type of answers. Your question is, what are the broad objectives of media studies in the context of this relationship between society and culture? Okay, so I interpret this question in this way. Correct me if I'm wrong. I first accept completely your position that culture and media are extremely interrelated. I would still say that culture is a broader box within which media exist, but it is also possible to consider that media at least as much broad box as culture, and culture being a part of it. So it's a both way traffic. Okay, so there's a huge traffic from culture and society to the media, and from media to the culture and society. The traffic is dynamic and two-way, and that's why it is very complex. Now, against this backdrop, what could be the broad objectives of media studies? This is, I think, your question is. There are two broad objectives of media studies, okay, academically. Okay, one is to evaluate the text produced by media, the work of the media under normative, ethical, social criteria, what we call it as normative, aesthetic, or ethical criteria, and decide what media produces to what extent it is good, desirable, and so on and so forth on certain criteria of culture. The aesthetic criteria of culture, the ethical criteria culture, the political criteria of culture, and so on and so forth. So that's one way of looking at it. So it is an evaluatory mode. So as an academician, as a student of media, I may evaluate the literature produced by media, okay, under some criteria. That's one way of thinking. The other objective of the media studies is to actually see how the media text itself is shaped by forces, economic forces, ideological forces. So rather than considering, media being simply an independent entity, it says media itself is a social institution. It is itself a cultural industry shaped by much larger industry as such. So what media produces is actually a result of some economic logic, some political logic, some cultural logic, some gender logic, okay, and so on and so forth. So it is considering media to be a fruit of social dynamism. The third way is reverse way and saying that how does media in turn shape the culture? And this is something that we often talk about. And in fact, the title of FDP is impact, right? There is a word impact in the title of the FDP.
I'm so sorry.
Now, impact from influence to impact. So studying the effect of media on society and culture. So these are some of the ways in which media studies take up these questions.
Yeah. The second question is, sir, the uproar and agitation with a near battlefield scene on our newsrooms is so disturbing that I have stopped watching Indian news channels. How do you see this imbroglio, and what is the solution?
Again, quite a pertinent question, quite a contemporary question, again, for which I wish I had the answer. Okay, at least the answer to the second part. I'll take the second part. How do we control it? I'm so sorry, friend, that as common person, I have no control over what might actually happen in the television studio discussions. The only control I have is remote control. Just stop watching it. And as I mean, this is not an entirely good solution, but at least a solution at our personal end. And I tell you, if we keep on exercising this control, many of us, I'm sure, these kind of brazen dramatization and this whole kind of a chaos that we see on many television news channel may sometime come down. I mean, this is my hope. I'll tell you why. And this is where I would have come to a broad question, but that would have taken, that might take long time. I'll cut the long story short.
Moderator,
hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. See, one of the reasons, I tell you an under ki baat or an inside story. What happens is, why do television channels have such noisy debates? One can, of course, consider a lot of political aspects to it, a lot of problems with the anchors and so on and so forth. That's true. I'm not saying it is not true. But I tell you, many anchors know precisely well that what they are creating in the studio is a din, is a chaos. Okay? It's a brazenness. They know it. And many times they deliberately create it. Why they deliberately create it? They know that it is not good, but they do it. Why? Because they know precisely that if they create a chaos, if they create a fight, they are quite likely to attract more eyeballs. And please, now this is where we come. Remember what happens when we are going on a road and there is a fight. Okay, there's a beautiful picture on the roadside and there is a fight on the roadside. Where will you stop at? I'm sure 90 out of 100 people would stop while they are traveling on a road. They will stop to see the fight, not the beautiful picture, right? This is some kind of a, human psyche, mindset, cognitive aspect. Though jhagda ho raha, if there is a lot of shout and action, we generally get attracted to it. That doesn't mean that we like it. So television channels are not interested in the aspect of liking. They are interested in only the aspect of watching, catching your attention. Okay. And that's why, as long as we give the attention to the dramatic, as long as we give attention to chaotic, there is no hope that the television channels would work in a reasonable way. Because I must tell you, friends, they are in the business of catching the attention. They get the money, they get running economically, financially, as long as they succeed in catching the attention. That's a bad aspect, but that's a reality.
There is one more question which is very much related
Yeah.
to the earlier question, and I think that Ms. Ambika Kamath, she must have got the answer of this question. Her question was, do you think the nature of digital medium facilitates misinformation and manipulation, which is seen in the political realm of social media? Are we heading towards a meaningless literary existence metaphorically?
Again, I have answers at two levels. First, a very basic level, that in the digital world, is there a lot of fakeness? I would say yes, very much. What do you mean by fakeness? Again, the fakeness can be calibrated on a long scale. I would not go into this, but it could be as fake as some touch up to your, photo that you upload as your DP.
Yeah.
That's also fake. For example, I know I don't have too much hair on my head, okay, or I have gray hair. But what I would do is, because I want to put a good photo, a young looking Vishram Dole on my DP, what do? I use some apps, okay, I gray my hair, and then I try to look smarter than what I am, with very little success, okay. But that's some expect level of fakeness, okay, at least an initial. I know I'm not very happy, but I post photos on Facebook which shows that I'm a very happy person, okay. So that's another level of fakeness, right from this fakeness to a complete fake news that something has absolutely not happened, but you make it appear that it has actually happened, and you mislead people. So there's a range of fakeness that is available on digital. And one of the reasons that faking is so easy on digital spaces, in digital literature, than in the traditional literature, is because traditional literature goes through a process of selection, editing, selection, rejection,
Your voice is breaking, Vishram
editing,
Dole.
publication, control. And that's why the chances of fake, is it now okay?
Yeah.
Is the voice
Now,
okay now?
yeah. Now it's okay.
Okay, right. So in calls, there is a lot of rejection, there's a lot of process, there's a lot of editing, there's a lot of control over distribution. Fakeness still survive, but the chances are less. But in digital spaces, the production is with anyone who has some data access can produce, anyone who has access to mobile camera can produce. So just too many people can produce. There are just not too many editors. I mean, no editors at all. Publication is so easy, just clicking and posting it, pressing the button post, and that's it. Okay. Then digital manipulation of images, text, photos, words, okay, linking and hyperlinking, video editing, visual editing. Because of that, the quantum of fakeness is huge on digital. So huge production, huge dynamism in production, then a lot of tools of manipulation, they are there, and therefore digital is a very I must say, digital is a very non-real word. It is a simulated word, not a real word. And I'll end the answer by one small point, which is actually a very philosophical point. uh, because digital world, many a times we go to digital world not so much for reality correction, reality check, but we go to real digital world for an experience, a simulated experience, a dopamine high. a high, a kick. Okay, I don't think we read newspapers, or I don't think we read books for a kick. Neither we get a kick by reading newspapers and books, but we do get a kick of sort when we are on Facebook and when we check it on this. And therefore, reality is not the dominant narrative mode, dominant narrative concern in the digital space, and therefore fakeness is also very high as such. Yeah, that's my broad response.
There are so many questions, but as we are running out of time, I will not be able to take all the questions. But of course, I'm going to direct those questions to you. And if you could answer those questions, I'll send those answers to the
Sure. Yeah.
respective
Yeah.
panelists.
Yeah.
There is a last
Yeah.
question that I would like to take up. That is, I'm so sorry, Nipam Kumar, I'm not going to take your question, as I'm going to direct it to sir. But there is one question in Marathi.
Yeah, I'll be able to get it.
Yeah. Uh, just a moment. Just a moment.
Yeah, no problem.
अभिव्यक्तीचे सहज माध्यम म्हणून आपण समाज माध्यमांकडे सकारात्मक का पाहू नये? डॉक्टर गजानन कोरतल यांनी हा प्रश्न विचारलाय.
ओके, मी मानतो ना तुमचा प्रश्न आणि तुमची कन्सर्न बरोबर आहे. I'll first answer it in Marathi, and those who do not follow Marathi, I'll quickly translate you. But since the question was Marathi, I find it to be proper to answer in Marathi because I know Marathi. अभिव्यक्तीचं स्वातंत्र्य हा खराच महत्वाचा मुद्दा आहे. आणि ही गोष्ट खरीच आहे की डिजिटल माध्यमांनी अभिव्यक्तीचं स्वातंत्र्य, पण अत्यंत महत्वाचं अभिव्यक्तीचं स्वातंत्र्य हे अनेकांना खऱ्या अर्थाने उपलब्ध करून दिलं. त्यामध्ये अभिव्यक्तीचं स्वातंत्र्य हे इतक्या सहजपणे आणि इतक्या सोपेपणे आणि इतक्या कमी खर्चामध्ये इतक्या सगळ्यांना उपलब्ध नव्हतं. ते फार कमी जणांना होतं, बरोबर. ते अगदी मुठभर मंडळींना होतं, कारण त्याची साधनं, त्याची आर्थिकता ही नव्हती. पण त्या तुलनेमध्ये डिजिटल माध्यमांनी नुसतं अभिव्यक्त होणं सोपं केलं असं नव्हे, तर अभिव्यक्तीचा जो आवाका आहे, त्याचा जो परिघ आहे, तो इतका व्यापक केला की त्याच्यामध्ये आजपर्यंत जे समाजाच्या परिघावर होते, ओके, त्यांना देखील त्यांनी अभिव्यक्तीच्या कक्षेमध्ये आणलं. आणि मला असं वाटतं की डिजिटल मीडियाचं हे एक फार मोठं फंडामेंटल, मूलभूत असं योगदान आहे. आणि त्या अर्थाने जर बघायला गेलं तर मी डिजिटल माध्यमांनी अभिव्यक्ती या बाबतीमध्ये डिजिटल माध्यमांकडे सकारात्मकतेने बघायला निश्चित तयार आहे. फक्त एक छोटासा मुद्दा मी इथे मांडतो आणि मग मी इंग्रजीमध्ये त्याचं ट्रान्सलेशन करतो. तो असा की ज्या वेळेला अभिव्यक्तीच्या प्रांतामध्ये आणि तीही मुक्त अभिव्यक्तीच्या प्रांतामध्ये अचानक इतक्या मोठ्या प्रमाणावर इतके जण यायला लागतात, अभिव्यक्ती इतकी सहज बनते, त्यावेळेला अभिव्यक्ती म्हणजे नेमकं काय, त्याच्या मर्यादा काय, हे ठरवणं हे भयंकर आव्हानात्मक बनतं. आज आपण ज्या डिजिटल माध्यमांवरच्या चक्रव्यूहामधून जातो आहे, तो हाच चक्रव्यूह आहे की आपल्याला एकीकडे अभिव्यक्तीचं स्वातंत्र्य तर हवं आहे, त्याची सकारात्मकता तर हवीच आहे, त्याचं लोकशाहीकरण तर हवंच आहे. पण हे लोकशाहीकरण होत असताना त्याचा गोंधळ, त्याचा केओस, त्यातून अभद्रता येऊ नये, हे कसं साध्य करायचं, हा खरा आपल्या पुढचा पेच आहे. त्याचे उत्तर इतक्या सहज साध्य नाही, माझ्याकडे नाही, कोणाचकडे नाही, पण मला अशी खात्री आहे की एक मानवजात म्हणून प्रगल्भ होत असताना आपल्याला कदाचित त्याची उत्तरं सापडतील. I'll quickly translate what I said, responded to this question in English. The question was, can we look at positively, can we positively see the freedom of speech and expression that is enabled by the digital media? And my quick answer to this is yes, it is great. We should and we must look at it positively, because digital media has actually transformed the speech and expression, the freedom, in multiple ways. It is first, it has made it so easy, so everyday experience, but that's equally importantly that it has also made it so easily available to thousands of people who never had this kind of an access to the digital media. People who were on the periphery of social margin, who were on the periphery of social power, expressive power, cultural power, who never had access to the books and other media. They could not get their voices across through the traditional media. Now have these voices, and their voices can be heard across the globe. Now that's a huge democratization of the power of expression. Now, to that extent, it is huge. But, and this is where I would end the answer, that remember the greatest dilemma before us is that yes, we are moving to an easy expression, a democratized expression, but it is also leading to a chaos of expression. We are not too sure what is good, what is bad, what is reasonable, what is non-reasonable, what is bhadra, what is abhadra, what is ethical, what is not. And the challenge before us to demarcate, to distinguish and establish some kind of a norms for righteousness of expression by keeping democratic principle in mind on the digital space. That's a challenge. It's a huge challenge to which none of us has a direct answer, quick answer, but I'm sure and I'm hopeful as we as individual, we as society would mature, we would also be able to find some answers. Thank you.
That's really wonderful. And we are all enlightened by this information.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to request Professor Abra for the to proceed forward for the next session.
Thank you, Rupa ma'am. Thank you, Dhole sir. It was extremely nice to hear so many things from you about media, with media, and how to live with media.
Thank you.
Now, officially, I would request Anil Patil sir to give official vote of thanks to our session 1 speaker.
Yes,
Anil
sir.
Patil sir?
Abra, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are.
Audible, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm Anil Patil, as Abra sir said. Dear Dhole sir,
Thank you.
it is my privilege to say vote of thanks because it was the session which was extremely influential, lucid, and highly effective.
Thank you, sir.
You can see it through the chat box. Many participants have mentioned that yes, they liked your session and you have really enlightened them.
Thank you. I'm happy to know this.
So you have highlighted so many aspects about digital, text, oral tradition, then print media. Some of the aspects like the idea of the medium, how McLuhan's message quotation is, medium is the message, the literary process, the journey like from text to hypertext, the young and the digital. You mentioned that the journey like from oral literature and how it transformed from oral literature into written, then to print, and then digital.
Yeah.
So it was really a captivating kind of message, a journey, and you really made us actually watch it.
Okay, thank you.
Experience it.
Thank you.
You talked about folk literature as well, and
Yes.
how the oral tradition has been reinvented. So it was really a great message. You talked about the idea of the new nomad.
Yeah.
Yes, three-screen phenomena also.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, we experience it, but we are not observing it. We do not actually see, yes, we are doing it, but you made us aware about it, sir. Surely. You talked about so many aspects of digital literature, and it was really enlightening, sir. Thank you so much
sir.
for it. Yes.
Thank you. My pleasure all the way.
So
I wish you all the best.
Yeah, of course, there were so many topics you covered. And all these areas and aspects you mentioned have a great significance, great relevance. Yes. So let me mention one point here.
Yeah.
The coordinators of this college, this FDP, have invited all the highly effective people, influential people as resource persons. Yes. And you are one of them, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I thank Rupa madam, a beautiful lady among all of us. Yeah, so for inviting all these people. to enlighten us. Sir, and we came to know another side of your personality, a jolly personality at the end of the session. Yes, so while answering the question about fake images and fake personality.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, totally different kind.
Yeah, thank you.
Similarly, as well as jolly personality.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And I want to mention one point here. I will conclude this session with some Hindi lines I just came across. I would read out for the participants, which is quite relevant in this period. जहाँ सिर झुक जाए वही ईश्वर का घर है, जहाँ सिर झुक जाए वही ईश्वर का घर है, जहाँ नदियाँ मिल जाए वही समुंदर है। इस जिंदगी में दुख तो आते हैं, इस जिंदगी में दुख तो आते हैं, जो दुख को समझ सके वही हमदर्द है। माना कि वक्त सता रहा है, माना कि वक्त सता रहा है, मगर कैसे जीना है वो भी तो बता रहा है। Really significant lines, quite relevant in this situation.
Thank you.
So, of course, not least, I thank Rupa Madam for this opportunity, scholarly lady, and our moderator, our mentor, Professor Abra sir. He is such an energetic, positive personality, a kind personality who has been supporting all the time. Yes. I thank both of you, madam and sir, for giving me this opportunity to actually converse, to talk about this and to express my vote of thanks. Thank you, Dhole sir, once again.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, giving us time and enlightening us. Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much and good day.
All the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
I take your leave.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I thank Anil sir for giving such an elaborate vote of thanks. Now we already have our second technical session speaker, Dr. S.K. Panigrahi sir, online with us. So officially, I would request Dr. Rasal sir, Rajesh Rasal sir, Dr. Rajesh Rasal, kindly introduce our next speaker for the day.
Good morning to all. I am Dr. Rajesh Rasal from Department of Hindi, Anna Sahib Magar College, Hadapsar, Pune. Today's speaker for the second session is Dr. S.K. Panigrahi. Dr. Shashikanta Panigrahi joined as an assistant professor of English in Shankar Dev College and Extended College on Northeastern Hill University, New. Shillong in 1985 and retired as a professor of English from the same institution on 13 April 2020. Professor Panigrahi has also served as the head of Bhaichara Chair for Studies in Development in Devi Ahilya University in Indore. As an associate professor for about 3 years, where during his tenure, Dr. Panigrahi developed a regular and compulsory semester program known as New World Order Studies, which was introduced in Master in Business Studies in the School of Economics and Management. Dr. Panigrahi has also coined another certificate course known as Ethical Management and Development that was widely received in many educational institutions in Indore, New, IGNOU, Shillong, Navy, Northeast Regional Institute of Education, and many other universities in India and abroad. On several occasions, Dr. Panigrahi has introduced Bahal teaching practices and believed in a number of universities and academic institutions overseas, such as Department of Language and Culture in Hong Kong University, Hong Kong, Shanghai School of Social Sciences at Shanghai, Lord John Saint University, London, and in many such international forums, he has been widely published and has authored several books. Apart from his regular teaching assignments, Dr. Panigrahi is an established teacher trainer and trainer of bureaucrats under the aegis of FAST, Foundation for Advancement of Science. Hyundai Northeastern Council NCERT chapter of Ceylon, known as NEDI, and National Institution of Social Security, Ministry of Labour, Government of India. Dr. Panigrai has been awarded by Jaipur University for his contribution to international peace education with contemporary concern in 2004. A college teacher awarded by the Honorable Governor of Meghalaya in 2006. Odisha State Council Award for Artistic Research and Training 2012 and Jaydev National Award under Ideal Teacher category in 2013. To name a few, thank you. Over to you, Dr. S.K. Panigrai.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Very, very kind.
So we can't hear you. No, you're still not audible. Participants, I must tell you that I haven't, we are going to have all attendance every day. So all of you have to attend the program because your certificates will be given on your attendance, on the assignments that we will be giving you, submission of the assignments and all. So please be careful because we have been seeing the participants. It is not so that you are logging in and going somewhere. Everything will be reflecting in your assignments. And we have the panel to see your assignments, to check your assignments too. So please be careful. There's some problem with Dr. S.K. Panigrai's audio visual aid. Just bear with us. It will be rectified soon.
Panigrai sir is trying to connect in. In the meantime, I would just have a couple of words with all the participants. We have been monitoring, as Rupa ma'am said, your attendance. That's primarily one of the important aspects of the FDP under HRDC Savitribai Phule Pune University. The second thing is the submission of assignments, be it good or bad, but that is a part of the FDP and we expect that to be done on time. Although we have been extending the deadline for last couple of days, instead of closing the link at 9, we have been doing at 9:15, 9:30, but assignments, again, we want it in place. And most importantly, I guess Panigrai sir is in. Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Again, you're not audible. You're not audible. No. Can you use your laptop audio?
Okay, so I'll just conclude with one single, a notification that I had to complete. That's regarding tomorrow. We will be having the valedictory session, and we have two eminent persons in the session. So I expect all participants to log in. We'll put the details in the session. Furthermore, there is one more thing that I want to put across, that in the valedictory session, we want a couple of participants to give your feedback about the whole FDP. So those who are interested could kindly register yourself with your mentors, group mentors. Any group mentor and their participants could present the view on the feedback. Most importantly, tomorrow's attendance is very important, because Sachin Survesar, who is the representative for this FDP from UGC HRDC of Savitribai Phule University, will be live with us, and we expect all participants to be there. So that's about the announcements for the day. Thank you. We'll just hold on with sir for a couple of minutes so that he can connect, and we can have him live.
All the participants, there is one more announcement, that tomorrow we are having chief guest who is Sahitya Academy Award winner. And I want all of you to please attend his session, because such people are very rare to attend such public programs. So please attend the session. It will be an enlightening session, I'm very sure. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Panigrahi, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
No problem. You can.
Thank God. Thank God.
Yes, sir.
You know, my paper is uh, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir,
Good afternoon,
kindly just
all the participants. In the meantime, some other alternate setup is being made, but I'm starting with this. Most respected principal, Dr. Rupasa and your team, HRD of UGC, those who gave me the privilege of presenting this paper and then sharing my thoughts. I thank you all to have given me the privilege and the honor and the opportunity. It was my paper is on a sense of fear it was actually a sense of fear that I started with. You remember that movie, uh, Wednesday, where Mr. Nasiruddin Shah with all those gadgets, but then yeah, he said that he is a common man. I wonder how he was a common man. He must be an extraordinarily uncommon man with all those gadgets and then coordinating with all those things. If I could share only my PPT with you, that would be wonderful. I'm just trying from this laptop if I can share my PPT and then I will start my paper.
Yes, sir. You are co-host and you can share your PPT.
That again will put me into a test. I don't know what are the responsibilities and what I should actually do. I'm not very computer savvy. And that is
No,
why the fear.
no problem, sir. You can do it.
I have just clicked on the bottom share screen. I don't know.
And then you have to share your PPT. Share screen and then share PPT.
Please come here. Share screen. Share screen and this PPT. Okay. I think this is done.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I start forthwith. This is a sense of fear and death found in literature of pandemics, vis-a-vis a Baha'i perspective of carving a new world order out of such crisis. As the first slide says, I have to go through some literature on pandemics. Here it is. Pandemics are mass murderers. Diseases like plague, smallpox, influenza, and cholera ruin families, destroy towns, and leave a generation scared and scared. Devastations caused by outbreaks impacted many major writers across India, such as Rabindranath Tagore, Premchand, Suryakant Tripathi, Fakirmohan Senapati, Shiva Shankar Pillai, and others, giving birth to hunting poems, short stories, novels, dramas, etc. Literature regards each individual with compassion and goes deeper than what statistical or historical records can tell us. Literature may not explain away or fight of things such as pandemics, even as modern science sometimes cannot. But it does become a source of consolation, a way of sharing our common humanist concerns, and in its own way provides the deepest and most insightful record of events. Tagore's long poem, I'm just giving you very, very short review of some of the literature of pandemics, maybe in a sentence or two about each, in order to convey the sense of fear and dread about the death and disease that are reflected in all these literature. Tagore's long poem, Puratan Vritya, or The Old Man Servant, tells the aching story of a much reviled house help who nurses his master to health but succumbs to smallpox itself. The poem, often recited as an elocution contest, remains a very popular work. A moving account of 1918 Spanish flu that claimed an estimated 12 to 70 million lives in India and between 50 to 100 million globally is found in Ahmad Ali's novel Twilight in Delhi. The Delhi-born author, who later migrated to Pakistan, talks about how shroud thieves stole the seeds from the graves and how grave diggers raised their fees fourfold during the pandemic. They didn't bother to see if the graves were properly dug or deep enough or not. They had so many more to dig in so little time. Premchand's Idgah is one of the most remembered such stories. Some might recall that its protagonist, the 5-year-old Hamid, lost his father to Haija. One of the characters succumbed to the plague. Many perished to the same disease. Cholera in Rebati, a well-known story by Fakir Mohan Senapati, often described as the father of Odia literature. Extremely virulent cholera continues to kill thousands on a global scale every year, not only in Odisha, neighboring West Bengal, Bihar, and in many other Indian states. Eminent Malayalam literature Sivasankar Pillai in his novel, uh, the translation of that novel is Scavenger's Song. A contagious disease sweeps through Alapaju town. In Kannada, writer U.R. Anantamurthy's masterpiece Sanskara, one of the main characters, Narayanappa, dies of plague. Now, if we cast our glance on Europe and across the world, we find plague and smallpox and other sorts of pandemics killed millions. In love in time of cholera, old age and death always looming in the lives. As that is marked by fear and shame, considering old age to be humiliating. The narration opens with the description of Antillean refugee Jeremy D. St. Armour's dead body, which his friend Dr. Juvenal Urbino is summoned to examine. When the doctor sees the dead body, he is shocked and soon realizes that he too is mortal.
Dr.
Over the
Shashikant,
course,
I'm so
yes,
sorry to disturb you. The slides are not moving, I think.
this is the second slide that I'm talking about.
No, we can't see it.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can see.
This is the slide which
Yeah.
I'm highlighting.
And can you
I'm trying to give a description of the literature on pandemics. Some are local, some are regional, and some are national, and some are global. And I'm trying to show this sense of fear and dread, which is connected with the death and disease of the pandemic. So this is a slide which is going on, and I'm almost halfway through it. Yes. Over the course of the novel, various characters, I was talking about uh, love in time of cholera. So when the doctor sees the dead body, he is shocked and soon realizes that he too is mortal. Over the course of the novel, various characters experience such moments of revelation. Indeed, although people such as Dr. Urbino play an important role in ridding society on dangerous diseases like cholera, the process of coming to terms with one's own mortality is intensely personal. In his novel The Plague, published in 1947, Albert Camus did not extend his imagined pestilence to the entire globe like the coronavirus that is threatening the planet now. In The Plague, he confined his scourge to Oran, a treeless, soulless port city ringed with luminous hills in his native Algeria. The hero, Bernard Rue, a young doctor with dark, steady eyes, is executing a routine surgery on an April morning when he feels underfoot an unpleasant softness, a dead rat. The rats emerge in force. Soon they are piled in garbage cans and carted off in batches. not before emitting a gout of blood, accompanied by shrill little death cries. The mysterious human fever immediately follows. Uh, but the normal life goes on, save that the death toll rises from several a day to more than 10, more than 20. And when it doubles to 40, the fateful telegram arrives. Proclaim a state of plague, stop, close the town. So this is what we see in most of the literatures. Whenever there is a pandemic of any kind, whether it is smallpox, whether it is cholera, whether it is plague, we see towns after towns are quarantined, they are closed down, and there is a sense of fear. Now I go to slide 3. I hope it is moving there also. This is about coronavirus. Its reign of death, fear, and horror, and its other fallout such as economic meltdown and all that that I have mentioned in the subpoints. Now, compared to what happened in Camus in the plague, well, hasn't the COVID-19 pandemic turned the entire world somewhat like this? Closing down every nation, province, megacities, small towns, hamlets, villages for months together, giving us a sense that we have become a haunted species. For many Americans and for most other people around the world, the virus conjures up horrible images of human suffering, illness, and the lack of ability to provide the basic human needs. A life where day-to-day existence comes with extraordinary risks, shortages, hardships, and real fear for tomorrow. Nothing said here is intended in any way to detract us from the essential and massive human tragedy inherent in each of these sufferings, but just to say, as the situation is on the ground everywhere. One of the greatest horrors has been the idea of displacement and distancing from the near and dear ones. We have seen the ghastly, heart-rending scenes of millions of hungry, sick, old, and infirm migrants trying to reunite with their families from one city to another, from one state to another. And it was such a human tragedy that has eclipsed what happened during the freedom at midnight. Of course, the violence, the bloodshedding, the rapes, and the likes that occurred rampantly during the times of partition were not there. But the human tragedy in terms of displacement from one place to another during hot summer days with pregnant women, small children being carried on trolley suitcases and trunks, videos of many of which have gone viral, have disturbed us all and will continue to haunt us for a long time. I don't want to prolong this theme any longer for the simple reason that this scene of mass movement during the time of the pandemics on a global and national scale has continued for over 3 months, and the same is still going on. Thousands of those migrants have undertaken their ordeals on foot, on bicycles, on cycle rickshaws, makeshift carts, and have fallen sick, dropped down dead. And many who have made it by buses, by Shramik trains, etc., have undergone Himalayan difficulties, have met with accidents, and most certainly each one of them has a very horrible tale to tell. And then many of them have brought the diseases to their families. This is the worst part. And to their communities, with whom they so desperately wanted to get reunited. Their excitement after all their ordeals have usually met with fiascos when they have been subjected to quarantine centers with further horrors in the form of substandard food, lack of water, the lack of standards in amenities of hygiene, and moreover, the dangers of being affected with the same virus if one or two from amongst the quarantine centers fell ill or became positive. The result is for everyone to see. As I said, no need to elaborate on this point, as most of us are aware what a dimension this global and national tragedy has come to. So much so, barring very wealthy, affluent, powerful, or barring those who are in the corridors of power, the Tom, Dick, and Harry are forced to sleep with the dead coronavirus victims. This is a macabre scene that we get to see on television and on other media as well, most of the times these days. But what is most horrifying is that the whole of human society has gone for a toss, in the sense that everything is out of gear. This is mainly caused by two things. A, every aspect of life has assumed a new dimension called as new normal, forcing everyone to get used to, just like I, I was trying to get used to these gadgets, and then, you know, the whole of my lifetime that I'm not acquainted to, that without an audience, to speak to an invisible audience, 310 or 320, I was told, wonderful participants who are probably listening to me. But this is a real dreadful, nightmarish kind of an experience for me, to tell you very frankly. So this is one new normal, and these are the hundreds and thousands of new normals that we are getting used to. And secondly, because of an unprecedented economic slump or meltdown everywhere. And I don't have to elaborate these two. Children, youths, and the general citizenry, one and all, is aware of it. And in this context, more than literature, which will take some time to evolve in every land on these issues, it is the newspapers, journals, medical councils, TV channels, social media that are exercising tremendous influence on the minds of the people in this regard. Now, here I will take a departure. This is the kind of, the sense of death and dread that the pestilences and the pandemics have caused. But I'll now shift to another slide. I think we have done this coronavirus disease and its fallout effects. I'm now drawing your attention towards this Baha'i Faith's views regarding the following topics, or the following themes, let's say: death and disease, because we discussed the kind of death and disease that we found in literature of pandemics. Now let us see what are the views of Baha'i Faith's views on death. In April, the Baha'i Chair for World Peace at the University of Maryland invited researchers to contribute articles for a series titled Learning During the COVID-19 Pandemics. In this context, one Mridula Garg says, writers all over the world constantly depicted the gory, macabre, and terrifying pictures of death surrounding this killer disease. The reason she believed that the emergence of a new breed of pandemic is linked to human behavior, or misbehavior rather. They are the result of destruction of forests, closer contact with wild animals, consumption of newer breeds of animals as food, and consequent lowering of biological barriers that kept the viruses prevalent in animals from affecting the humans. We writers, he said, are concerned about this phenomenon, and some work should emerge from it. The crisis is revealing both sides of human nature, leading us to think about how we wish to emerge from this period, says Huda Mohammadi, holder of the Baha'i Chair for World Peace, says, will we have made real positive strides, not in appearance only, in achieving greater unity and solidarity. The articles explore the effects of the pandemics on economics, the environment, the media, and other areas of life. A common theme is how the health crisis has revealed vast inequalities in society. Alison Brisk of the University of California, Santa Barbara describes racism and human rights abuses as diseases that are propagated in society through othering and social atomization. Dr. Brisk notes that overcoming adversity and oppression have historically depended on social solidarity. This suggests that our ability to confront the epidemic of dehumanization uh, will be the key, not just to survive the coronavirus epidemic, but to survive as a civilization. Now, having said this, let us come to some of the writings from the Baha'i literature about the sense of death, not only from coronavirus, but death as such, death in general. There is one writing I quote. It says, "O son of spirit, with the joyful tidings of light I hail thee. Rejoice. To the court of holiness I summon thee. Abide therein, that thou mayst live in peace forevermore." Then there is a beautiful writing that I was trying to skip, but then I think I should read it out here. It says, "O Son of the Supreme, I have made death a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve? I made the light to shed on thee its splendors. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom?" Then there is another writing, says, "The spirit of power confirmeth thee in his cause. Why dost thou veil thyself? The light of his countenance doth lead thee. How canst thou go astray, O son of man? Sorrow not save that thou art far from us. Rejoice not save that thou art drawing near and returning unto us. O son of man, rejoice in the gladness of thine heart, that thou mayst be worthy to meet me and to mirror forth my beauty." Now, these were some randomly selected Baha'i writings that were just juxtaposed in order to show the shallowness of the kind of death that we are talking about, of which we are so very much worried and afraid. That doesn't mean to say that we will get rid of our masks and we will not have any social distancing and we will embrace this virus and we'll have a ball with it. No, but then the kind of, uh, I think the kind of situation that you find in the hospitals, kind of situation that you find non-coronavirus patients undergoing in the hands of the hospital workers, that they will not be allowed in and things like that. And even the relatives and the near ones and dear ones not trying to accept the dead bodies. These kind of horrors that we are seeing are usually because of the dread or the fear that is associated with this virus. That was these writings were just to show us that should we get over this sense of dread and fear, and really with a sense of compassion, sense of unity and solidarity, uh, will really treat these cases in a more compassionate manner. Baha'i view of service is like developing our sensory organs and our physical faculties after we leave this world. I mean, why should we serve the society at this critical hour? What exactly happens when we serve the humankind? There is a very graphic presentation by taking the examples from the examples of the kingdom of the womb, mother's womb, which is worthy of mention here and worthy of being contemplated and meditated upon. This is the supreme wealth with which we endow ourselves in this world of existence. After death, our body and all its organs mingle with dust. There is nothing of the body that ascends to the celestial kingdom of the Supreme. Then how does the soul that climbs to the other kingdom sees or hears or converses there? That means we leave our sensory organs here, our tongue, our sense of smell and touch. We leave everything here. Then how does the soul converse? How does the soul see and hear? It is through service. In order to explain this, we have to understand the world of Mother's womb vis-a-vis this earthly world. See, whatever physical requirement we need in this world, they all came with our body from the world of the womb. Had there been a little lacking in all that, such as lacking in vision or hearing, then we would be blind or deaf in this world. Therefore, logically speaking, if anything that is required in this world was actually manufactured in its previous world, then whatsoever that shall be required in the other world or kingdom of God has to be manufactured here. And Baha'i writings repeatedly warns that this has to be developed by rendering service to our fellow men, by believing and working towards the oneness of mankind, best expressed through Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, our world is but one family. To this end, every weighty books and scriptures and literatures must be directed. And to this end, all crises lead us to. In other words, when we don't take this as a cardinal learning by ourselves, crises of various forms compel us to this goal. Therefore, in a way, this was my theory so far, that all these pandemics, wars, diseases, calamities, pestilences, etc., especially on a global scale, are nothing but to make us realize that we have to get united in our efforts to reach a sort of a state of cohesion and coexistence, and to empower ourselves to rise up to the sort of service of uniting the whole world. And that is the education and training that we must receive from this fear of death and disease of a COVID-19 kind of virus. If thousands of pages of literature, philosophy, history, aesthetics, science and technology, medicine, warnings by WHO could not bring us together, probably this virus is ultimately going to teach us that. Now I go to another slide, role of individual, of community and institutions within the Baha'i faith, and what are their roles, especially in encouraging the youths, the Baha'i youths, and the Baha'i youths, because of their outward reach with other population, other citizenry of the world, how together they are going on serving in many areas of the world, in every nook and corner of the world during this time of pandemic. Although social distancing and all those things are in place. Communities around the world are demonstrating tremendous courage and resilience in response to the COVID-19 pandemics. COVID-19, despite its terrible impact on societies, is exposing glimmerings of an increased appreciation for humanity's inherent oneness. From Italy to Uganda, United States to Vanuatu, Kazakhstan to Sierra Leone, unity and fellow feeling, knowledge and understanding, a spirit of collective worship, and common endeavor are emerging as fundamental prerequisites to responding to current realities, regardless of culture, geography, or circumstances. Notable in this regard is the important role that the institutions of the faith and various committees, they all are playing in vast majority of societies around the world. And the core activities of the Baha'i faith have been the kind of fuel or the kind of impelling force that are also highlighting these constructive initiatives in the face of growing challenges all over the world. I'm just giving you some case studies. In Uganda, Baha'i community, I have also tried to reflect them in a kind of a photo feature in the next slide probably, but I'm just reading out some descriptions so that the photos are not very minutely examined and times are not lost, which is already lost a little bit in the beginning because of myself not being organized to this technological presentation. In Uganda, Baha'i community members are using radio or bringing hope and joy to their neighbors, encouraging prayer and meaningful conversation. This has inspired acts of service in their societies, supporting in particular those who are most vulnerable. In Italy, uh, one of the countries very recently, which was the worst affected, we all know, online gathering of devotional nature are being offered to friends and family members as well as neighbors and colleagues, those who have lost their dear ones. Baha'i house of worship such as in Chile, United States and in India in Lotus Temple are adopting new virtual approaches to infuse society with the spirit of collective worship that these structures embody. In Indonesia, regular online gatherings to pray for and consult upon the well-being of the community have provided a space for members to naturally reflect on how they can help others in their neighborhoods. Their conversations have led to an initiative that produces and distributes masks to those who need them the most. In a remote place in Sierra Leone, a group of youth used films to convey information about effective health measures, assisting doctors, village leaders, and other members of the community to raise awareness as broadly as possible. The academics I have already mentioned about Baha'i Chair for Peace in Maryland. Academics and social actors from around the world, in response to an invitation from the Baha'i Chair for World Peace at the University of Maryland on lessons emerging during the health crisis, touching on economics, environment, and media. This I have spoken about. It is in the same vein on above several subjects, Baha'i Academy at Panchgani has been organizing several local, national, and international webinars, hammering the point home that come whatever may, but social cohesion and a newfound moral capability emerging out of this health crisis will not only see us through, but will give new meaning in redefining our common and shared destiny. The contribution of all Baha'i institutions such as the above aim to broaden understanding and knowledge as well as to inspire action in response to the pandemic. In this connection, I would like to mention the role of the youth because a part of the sub-theme of this webinar is the impact of literature on youths. Now, tens of thousands of youths unwilling to succumb to triviality or to settle for easy conformity have now been brought with the widening embrace of a conversation and pattern of action of far-reaching consequence regarding how to live a coherent life and be an agent of spiritual and social transformation. In this respect, effects of prayer is of paramount importance during the time of this health crisis, not only here by the Baha'i institutions and temples all over the world, but we also see it in the outside world, such as in Kansas City. An Indian American physician in Kansas City has begun a study to find if something called remote intercessory prayer might initiate God to heal those infected with the coronavirus. And hundreds of youths are being attracted towards this idea, which is otherwise now being known as a kind of a medical research by the Medical Council of the United States of America. Dhananjay Lakireddy launched the 4-month prayer study on Friday, which involves 1,000 coronavirus patients who are in intensive care. In the study, none of the patients prescribed standard care will be changed. They will be divided in 2 groups of 500 each, and prayer will be offered to one of the groups. Uh, we also saw the effects of prayer on the National Day of Prayer in Washington, D.C., in the White House itself. Harish Brahmavat, a Hindu priest who was invited by US President Donald Trump on the occasion of the National Day of Prayer service, chanted the Vedic Santipath prayer at the White House. In these troubled times of COVID-19, it is not unusual for people to feel not at peace, Harish Brahmavat said. It is a Vedic prayer derived from Yajurveda. At the invitation of US President Donald Trump, Pujari Harish Brahmavat from the Swaminathan Mandir in New Jersey joined religious leaders from other faiths offering prayers on the occasion of National Day of Prayer service. In his remarks, the president said on the National Day, America is engaged in a fierce battle against a very terrible disease. Throughout history, in times of challenge, our people have always called upon the gift of faith, the blessing of belief, the power of prayer, and the eternal glory of God. I ask all Americans to join their voices and their hearts in a spiritual union as we ask our Lord in heaven for strength and solace, of courage and comfort, for hope and healing, for recovery and renewal. I now go to a photo feature on different activities as outlined just now. Here are some youths in New York appointed as official food staff. Then we have Baha'is of Kurdistan, region of Iraq, those who have been organizing weekly online forums where academics, social actors, religious leaders, and government officials are examining spiritual principles in times of crisis. We have a Baha'i youth in the Baha'i House of Worship, New Delhi, who is holding public broadcast of devotional sessions. Then we have in Indonesia, both parents and their children are enrolled in Baha'i-inspired community schools. This is what is going on now online. Thousands and thousands of children are joining these Baha'i Baha'i classes for children, along with their tutors and their teachers, and they are chanting prayers, they are telling wonderful stories, and all in remembrance of the corona victims and for the health and happiness of the world. Then we have youth in Basel, Slovenia, constructed an informative poster on the coronavirus and displayed it prominently. Then we have weekly community devotional meetings, virtual meetings by Baha'is for the health and betterment of the world. This is going on all across the world. This is from my place, Bhubaneswar, relief distribution to needy and migrant workers by Baha'i communities in Odisha. Then we have a Baha'i, another core activity named a study circle, where the citizens of the world are trained to work for the betterment of the world. Here is a Baha'i class for children and for junior youths, which is held all over the world to create moral awareness and spiritual empowerment. Please don't underestimate these core activities which are going on all across the world. They are the spiritual energy they are mustering. They are the kind of batteries which are preserving the kind of spiritual energies, and it is being supplied wherever it is required in the world at this moment during this time of crisis. I had I have a compilation on Baha'i literary works. It's a very long kind of a thing in itself. This itself is a kind of a research topic, but I will just precisely mention a few things about this, because we are discussing about literature and we are discussing about the impact of literature on youths and on the general citizenry of the world. That's why I will just read out a few lines that I have compiled on this particular slide. Uh, I will have to find out the pertinent lines. Yeah, here it goes. This is to state that the entire gamut of Baha'i literature is a vast roaring space. Baha'u'llah has written about 100 volumes on the laws of his religion, its socio-spiritual and economic principles. It stands on equality between men and women, science, religion, and development. Its approach to New World Order through devotionals, education of children, junior youths, and other educational programs for the vast multitude involving millions of people. Uh, Very humbly, if I may be allowed to put it, no other religion in the past has put such a detailed emphasis on universal education as a tool to world peace. Apart from the literature on the aspects, there is another unique subject of covenant or agreement that is very unique to this dispensation of global religion. Now, this is for the participants to investigate. There are some classics or some volumes, some religious volumes. They are the Kitab-i Aqdas or the Book of Laws, Kitab-i Ahad, the Book of the Covenant, Will and Testament of Baha'u'llah, the World Order of Baha'u'llah, Remembrance of God, a compilation of revealed prayers by the central figures, Hidden Words of Baha'u'llah, and God Passes uh, by an eminent religionist Baha'i, uh, His Honorable Sogi Effendi, known as the guardian of the Baha'i faith. I'll only touch upon only these books, and the rest is for the participants to investigate. I had just said, I wanted to give 5 passages on unity and oneness, but I'll just read out only one passage. O children of man, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other. Ponder at all times over your hearts how you were created, since we have created you all from the same substance. It is incumbent on you to be even as one soul, to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land. That from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the sight of oneness and the essence of detachment may be made manifest. Such is my counsel to you, O concourse of light. Heed ye this counsel, that ye may obtain the fruit of holiness from the tree of wondrous glory. Divinely ordained Baha'i administrative order, this I will skip, except to say that whenever there are about 9 adult Baha'is, either in a panchayat or in a municipal area in a town, or in a corporate in a mega city, they will come forward to form local spiritual assembly or local house of justice. Baha'u'llah loved the virtue of justice and said, "This is the best beloved of all my sights." And that's why most of the futuristic, world embracing institutions that will govern the world, as he foresaw, are known as or as are all marked by justice. Local house of justice, mini house of justice, which are the national spiritual assemblies, and then the universal house of justice. This universal house of justice, which is the supreme body, the infallible body of the Baha'is, which is almost like the will and testament of God on earth, and which will guide uh, the future destiny of all mankind. It was formed in 1963, first ever in Albert Hall in London. I'll just read out two or three passages from a historian, you may call her historian or an eyewitness, and that is self-explanatory. That what kind of a thing was really happening in the world that aspires and boasts, if I may say so, to govern the whole world in future when world will become one. Thousands of men and women came to this Congress from every corner of the earth. There were Americans, Mexicans, Brazilians, Africans, Indonesians, and Australians. People had come from all over the vast continent of Asia. And Europeans from Lapland to Spain were all to be seen in that unusual gathering. It seemed like a dream, a miracle. Could the various nations, I'm sorry, I have lost it. I'll take only 1 second, please.
Sir, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I continue here. It seemed like a dream, a miracle. Could the various nations really come together? Could the races accept each other as one people? Could the Christian and Hindu, the Muslim and Jew, the Zoroastrian and the Buddhist, forgetting all their differences, forgetting all their religions, forgetting all their national pride, work together as children of one God? The dream had indeed come true. The miracle will surely happen. These people who had gathered in the Albert Hall proved that a new age had dawned upon the world, that the brotherhood of man could now become a reality. For the first time, they had not come to solve their differences, but to work in complete agreement. So this is the first ever, uh, you know, formation of Universal House of Justice in Albert Hall in London. Now, this is the end to what my paper is really coming to, that whatever it is, yes, on one side we see wars and pestilences and pandemics and all sorts of uh, crises and calamities, miseries and afflictions plaguing us, striking us one after another, each one more fierce and devastating than the previous stroke that strikes the mankind. So it is like the thesis and the antithesis, the constructive force and the deconstructive force. So can we really think of a world commonwealth, a charter of a Baha'i world commonwealth? Please allow me just 5 more minutes, then I will finish my talk or my paper by just giving you all uh, by giving you an example of what had happened in the turn of the century in Johannesburg in the year 2000. We all know that more than the pandemic, the economic situation world over has become so alarming that a near solution is not at sight. A meltdown of this nature had happened during the turn of the century in the year 2000 for various reasons. I'm not going into the reasons simply for the lack of time, but this is what had happened then. Mr. James Wolfensohn, president of the World Bank, came up with an out of the hat idea, something completely unimaginable for the president of such a mighty and potent financial institution of the world. He, in order to address and mitigate this crisis, and in order to turn it to victory, thought of bringing all the major religions of the world together and orchestrated a dialogue between World Bank and world faiths as a new approach to ride over the crisis and to eradicate poverty.
Sir, we can't hear you. Dr. Panigrahi, you're not audible.
Hello.
Yes, now we can hear you.
In this meeting in Johannesburg, there were academics who happened to be die-hard followers of development issues and also representatives of NGOs, leaders from Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, Judaism, Sikhism, Taoism, and the Baha'i faith, who together represented the religious traditions followed by an estimated 4 billion people. Mr. James Wolfensohn, president of the World Bank, himself represented the World Bank. From the meeting came a joint statement signed by Mr. Wolfensohn and by the event's co-sponsor, the Archbishop George Carey. This is what the United Charter says. I skipped many things, but this is what the charter signed it at the closure of the meeting. We share a deep moral concern for the future of the human well-being and dignity, with firm conviction that every crisis can be turned to victory by striking a chord of unity amongst various peoples of the world that can be brought about by unity of all religions, with firm conviction that the definition and practice of desirable development must have regard to spiritual, ethical, environmental, cultural, and social considerations, and hereby urge all the parties concerned to continue and develop this dialogue, to deepen our relationship with one another, and to look forward to possible new ways of working together in future at many different levels. The Baha'i speaker during her turn caught everyone's attention by saying that she had a different speech to present, but by looking at what the academics, religionists, sociologists under the banner of such mighty institution as World Bank had visualized in eradicating economic calamities, and that too through unity of religions, so as to bring about the unity in world that in its turn will not only solve the present crisis but will turn it to victory. The speaker drew the attention of all to what the guardian of the Baha'i faith, Honorable Sogi Effendi, had to say on such situation. She quoted the guardian in following words, and probably that will be my last quotation, in order to drive home the point about what I had been talking to you all uh, in course of my paper. This is what she says. This is what the Guardian says, and Madam Rabbani, the Baha'i speaker, quoted it. The consummation of the world commonwealth, by its very nature, will be a gradual process, and must, as Baha'u'llah himself anticipated, lead at first to the establishment of that lesser peace, which the nations of the earth, as yet unconscious of its revelation and yet unwillingly enforcing the general principles that he had enunciated, will themselves establish. This momentous and historic step involving the reconstruction of mankind as the result of the universal recognition of its oneness and wholeness, will bring in its wake the spiritualization of the masses, consequent to the recognition of the character and the acknowledgement of the claims of the faith of Baha'u'llah, the essential condition to that ultimate fusion of all races, creeds, classes, and nations, which must signalize the emergence of his new world order. The second slide of this clip is regarding worldwide crisis leading the humanity to oneness. Corona pandemic is one of those calamities. Let us think about each of us growing up, physically and mentally. What do we see? Do we see only growth? Have we forgotten about the various diseases against which we were vaccinated, injected, right from our birth? Diseases, afflictions are part of our growth, another side of our existence. When a disease attacks us, it's the entire body and its combined defense system called as immunity or spirit of resilience that fights against the disease. Similarly, when we are suffering globally from this virus, we must fight it unitedly and with our combined force. Then only we shall win, not only against the disease, but will have emerged as one world in the process, in the other side, uh, after this pandemic. My conclusion is about a new world order, essential prerequisites of the time. There are other points, day never to be followed by night. But there is a very interesting point that is Ramarajya, burnout of crisis, entailing the twin and simultaneous process of crisis and victory. Now, what do we see on the 5th of August when we are going to have this beautiful Ram Mandir to be
So you are not audible.
Is it audible?
Yes,
Hello.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch upon the last point, just a kind of a symbol on the 5th of August, or I'm not very sure when this Bhumi or the Ram temple is being inaugurated in Ajodhya. This is also happening at a time of crisis, symbolizing uh, the temple of beauty, the temple of oneness. This is also happening in this land as if to reverberate the point or echo the point that I have mentioned in my conclusion. I'm speaking other 3 points. Those are for question answers. Maybe something will emerge from there. But symbolically speaking, this Ramarajya burnout of the crisis is the symbolic inauguration of the temple in Ajodhya, uh, probably on the 5th of August. I'm not very sure about the date when it is going to happen. And that too amid this global holocaust or this kind of, health crisis. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I was completely disorganized and disjointed because not being computer savvy, and probably to have emotionally missed out by not, seeing a wonderful audience in front of me. I'm not very much used to that. I uh, I I retired immediately when the lockdown started, which means that I'm not into a culture of really virtually addressing so many intellectuals at such a time without really the body languages transmitting their emotion and their sentiments, and myself reciprocating it or themselves, yourselves, I should say, reciprocating it. So with such a kind of a lacuna that I could be able to present my views, I'm thankful to God, and I'm really, really thankful to Dr. Upasa and to all the organizers. I'm sorry that I cannot take your names one and all, but thank you all to have given me the privilege and the honor. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was indeed a soothing experience to listen to you. And if you could see the chat box, you can find that many of the participants have got the similar experience that I have got. So there are a few questions I would like to ask you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Sir, people, even the most wise ones, are very fearful of death and extinction. How can we develop the graceful art of dying and saying goodbye to this mesmerizing earth with a smiling face? What's Baha'i view regarding this? The question is by Charan Singh. Sir, we can't hear you.
Now I'm sure you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
And I can see myself. That means you can see me now also.
Yes.
So everything is, all is well that ends well. And ma'am, as I said, my view is my view. And in case, the answer is very simple, because the Baha'i view is there for me not to grow too much into darkness about finding the beauty of death. One of the best elements about our life is submitting to the will of God. Even those who don't believe in God, I must say, there is a beautiful universal power. There is a cosmic power, and that power is much more greater than me. I think we believe in that. This power of nature, the power of universe, is so very vast, so very majestic, so very big and large compared to my strength and whatever is under my circumstances. So having a realization of that, it is always very easy to submit to the will of God or to submit to the will of the universe. He doeth as he doeth. And what records have we? What kind of a power do you think I have whenever such a powerful cosmic universal power is casting its sovereignty and its authority on my life? So if something is trying, something which is extremely powerful than me is trying to take away my life, do you think by any other power I can arrest that kind of will and not to exercise its will of taking away my life? If that is not so, then why should I and why should I shriek? It is better for me to submit in the will of God, so that my pain and my suffering and sorrows will become a little less. So this is one. The second thing is detachment. We all know that we come to this world as croppers, as paupers. We had nothing absolutely when we came to this world. And we all know when we go out of this world also, there will be nothing. But as I just told, plenty many things we will be taking back. And what are those plenty many things? The eyes to our soul, the ears to our soul, the mouth and the speech to our soul. And that is why most of the great, if not religious scriptures, the wonderful literatures have said that service to humanity is service to God. I don't know whether they were believing in God or not, but service to humanity, they definitely believed in. So once we saw the humanity, we have developed so much of wonderful virtues by way of giving ears and eyes to our soul that we are now assured that in another world, in another mother's womb, we will go and speak and converse with that. So why should I be afraid? Now, I give you the last example. This will be an analogy after which I think the fear about death or the dread or the horrors about death will be completely put at rest. Now, I'm inside this room. In order to arrest the air conditioner or the kind of, the controlled climate, I have closed the windows and the doors. Now, if I want to get out of this room, what is the most plausible or logical thing that I have to do? I have to open the door. So death is just like, man, opening the door to your life. If your life was circumscribed, if it was limited inside the room, inside the body, now your eternal life or your life forever, once you open the door, you are out into a corridor, you are out into a vast universe, you are out into a bigger world. So it is a much bigger world. So it is a much better world. So why should I be afraid?
Okay, sir.
This is the Baha'i view.
Yeah. There is a last question that I would like to ask you. Would you please light put light on the harmony of science and religion is a fundamental principle of the Baha'i faith?
Uh, Again, I will try to give you, I will cite one incident. The history has proved it. It is in archives. Try to investigate it in any manner you can find it. 1844, 22nd of May, late hours in the evening, when the prophet herald of this faith, known as Bab, who was the door to this faith, because he would actually be the harbinger to another mighty manifestation known as Baha'u'llah. But please leave aside that. Bab was for the first time declaring his mission to only one of his disciples, and that was 1844, 22nd May. It was late evening. And what did he say? He said, "Lo and behold, I have come to unite the whole world." This was a very compulsive kind of a claim. I have come to unite the whole world. If during the time of Lord Krishna and Lord Buddha, I said Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam as a kind of a slogan, but there was no science to actually harmonize or to implement the kind of a claim. I have come to, fulfill that claim. And believe me, on that very evening, nay, on that very moment, actually, the historians found it out. That very moment, the very first telegraphic message was being carried from London to Baltimore, and it was being conversed between Samuel Morse and Graham Bell. And do you know what was the first telegraphic message? The first telegraphic message was, "See what God hath wrought," means what God has done. The world has become one. So here, about 5,000 or 7,000 kilometers away from the place of the first telegraphic message, a spiritual leader, a spiritual missionary was transmitting his purpose of uniting the whole world. And here was science orchestrating or was echoing the same thing by giving out the first telegraphic message. Well, if you think that was only symbolic, but I just had to tell you because the first telegraph message actually went 1844, 22nd of May, late evening, almost at the same moment when the Bab was declaring his mission in front of Mullah Hussain. This is one. Second thing, look at the kind of inventions, call them discoveries of jet planes, of intimation, of television, of camera, of fountain pen. One after another, most of these inventions happened in between 1840 to 1850. This shows that when there was a claim, there was a spiritual claim, world embracing claim that world will become one and mankind religions, it was just not being thrown into the thin air. The scientific implements and the scientific tools and the scientific instruments were being invented and discovered one after another in order to echo that sentiment, in order to justify that claim.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, sir,
Thank you so very
there are a
much.
few questions, but I'm going to direct them to you as we are running out of time. But thank you. It was really wonderful and really very spiritual and mesmerizing speech. I really appreciate on behalf of all the participants. Now, I would like to request Abra sir to go ahead with the next program.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you, Panigrai sir. It was an excellent session by you, and the effort you took to get the technical hitches out was great. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Rupa ma'am,
In
for
the end, the mobile came to my rescue.
yes, sir, of course. Now, officially, I would request Dr. Anuj sir to kindly give the vote of thanks for this particular technical session. Dr. Anuj.
Thank you, API sir. It's my privilege that I was chosen to give vote of thanks. Uh, Sir Panigrahi, as Rajesh Rasal sir has also already mentioned about his tons of experience and the way he has given a brief sketch of Baha'is philosophy is indeed credible, and it was very informative. Those who do not know about Baha'is faith, I'll just give you an idea that it started in Iran in mid 19th century, and it teaches about unity of all religions. Sir gave the examples of the local literature and the global literature, including few names such as Rabindranath Tagore, Hindi poet Nirala, great Oriya literary scholar Fakir Mohan Senapati, and his example about Revati. He gave example about Albert Camus' The Plague. He also mentioned about the displacement of human migrants, which happened locally and globally. And so you were right to say that human society has gone for toss, and you yourself gave example of the glitches which you faced, and then the human race has to accept the new normal. uh, Sir, you also gave information about Baha'is faith. That was very engaging, sir. It clearly showed about how the change has happened in human consumption and how it is affecting now. There were other problems which you raised, like distrust and the dehumanity which we have to face in near future, and how we can tackle it by oneness, and how the purpose should be to attain the challenges by cohesion and coexistence. uh, Sir, there are so many points, but as we all know that we have already crossed the time limit. So seriously, sir, it was very engaging. It was very informative. The way you have imbibed everything, you have internalized the whole bias philosophy in your life. So I thank you very much. One point which Anil Bhaurao sir also mentioned, that I would like to thank all the coordinators, those who are from Pratibha College, that they have done an exemplary job, and they have called eminent scholars, and all of them has basically enhanced us and have made us or given us an opportunity that how as academicians we can face the new normal or the new world order. uh, uh, Also, I would like to mention, probably that will be in the valedictory ceremony, but still, that is one of the most inevitable part is the technical support staff, which are unseen, which are part and parcel of this whole functionary. So, one and all, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. We
Thank
can
you.
call it a day
Thank
today.
you.
Abrasa, do you have to have some announcement?
Basically, again, I would request all the participants to be on time, to be attending the session, technical one, tomorrow, the last session of the FDP, and most importantly, the valedictory function, because we have got two eminent people coming online tomorrow for the valedictory function, and your attendance, most importantly, is being monitored. So we don't want any sad thing happening after attending so many days and giving so many submission and assignments. So I request all participants to be online tomorrow at 10:50. We will start sharp at 11 a.m. Thank you all.
Thank you all.